Chapter 98. 2. Curtains close for the 8th level spirit beast. In order to not let those two troublesome girls come to be a hindrance to Qingyu, Zhongmai stretched his hand out and pulled them over to his side before he picked up the still unconscious Qingbei to retreat back by about 100 meters. When in his invisible state, no one was able to see him except for Qingyu, and hence, when they saw Qingbei's body lifting up into the air, the two girls who felt themselves being dragged together along then exchanged a glance with each other, both their eyes showing utter disbelief and shock. But when they saw that they were at a seemingly safe place, they were then not so afraid anymore. Seeing Qingyu, who was facing that enormous and terrifying monster all by herself, Yanshiro's face then creased up to ask with a bitter laugh, "Will she die?" The golden-haired youth, who was watching the battle, inadvertently heard that question, and he turned a sinister gaze upon them, before he sent a knuckle sandwich flying. The pain caused Yanshiro to let out a loud cry, and she then turned to look around her, her face looking like she had seen a ghost. "What's with you?" Yanshiwu asked puzzledly upon seeing her clasp her hands over her head. "Nothing, nothing," Yanshiro replied sheepishly. Has she encountered a ghost? She had said it so softly and she was heard. It couldn't have been Qingyu that rapped her on the head, right? The thick and powerful tail then swept towards her, and Qingyu easily dodged, only to see that the spot she had just been standing in was now a deep hole. If she had not avoided the blow, she would have been smashed into meat paste from the one strike. Her eyes turned icy. Since this fellow was dead set on wanting her killed, then she would go into battle with everything she had. Within those wide poison-filled gaping jaws, its teeth sharp as saws ground against each other, like they wanted to shred her up so badly. As it came closer, the strange odor emanating in waves out from those jaws caused the complexion on Qingyu's face to turn an ugly shade, and her eyes to flash with a vicious glint. The slender figure leapt up into the air and landed straight upon the demonic centipede's head. A beam of light flashed in her hand, and in the very next instant, an agonized and rage-filled roar shot towards the clouds that seemed to shake the ground and made the mountains quiver. Immediately thereafter, the creature's large head with its jaws filled with its saw-like teeth was seen to have a good half of it sliced right off, and blood was spurting out everywhere unendingly. In an instant, the chaos that erupted became even worse than that of the storm that struck when the creature advanced in level and transformed, as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting apart. It caused all the other spirit beasts to shiver and shake, their hearts filling up with despair, thinking that they would most probably have to leave their lives behind here today. Although Qingyu had moved very quickly to get away from the demonic centipede's side, but in a moment of carelessness, she had been struck by a flying rock swept up by the enormous tail's thrashing. Excruciating pain washed over her, and she subconsciously bit down hard on her lip. She seemed to have dislocated her arm. The golden-haired youth's eyes grew dark when he saw that, the beautiful silver-gold orbs becoming tainted by a black mist, looking unspeakably strange and evil. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. A weapon spirit is linked in mind with his contracted owner, and although Qingyu consciousness was distracted by the agonizing pain, she had still noticed the change that was coming over Zhongmai, and her brows knitted tightly together. Little burrow. She did not know what the lad had done that he had kept hidden from her before. That devilish spirit of a human he had used to restore his spirit body must have belonged to someone extraordinary. Otherwise, how could it have such a great effect on little burrow? "I'm fine. Calm yourself down. Do not lose your mind." The youth blinked his eyes. That expression on his face was clearly so innocent and adorable looking, but insidious murder was hidden behind it somehow. "But it has hurt, mistress." The young lady's exquisite and beautiful countenance was stained with a speck of bright red blood. She had gotten that scrape when she was flung out in that one moment of carelessness. At that moment, she lifted her slender fingers up and wiped the blood cleanly off. By the time she raised her eyes up, her gaze was already tinged with bloodthirsty murder. Chapter 98. 3. Curtains close for the 8th level spirit beast. The cherry pink lips curled up in a mesmerizing arc, so beautiful it moved one's very soul. "Little burrow, how long do you think I will need to take this fella down?" The youth's eyes flashed slightly as he looked at the rage-filled demonic centipede, who was stirring up a violent sandstorm with its massive body before he said, with it being in a berserk state, its powers is comparable to that of a 9th-level spirit beast. If this was to be dealt with by my mistress of the past, you would have killed it in an instant. But with your current self. About an incense stick's time. Qingyu listened to the youth's carefully worded statement, like he was afraid that her pride would be hurt, but had still chosen not to deceive her. She gave a light laugh, and then slowly walked towards the roaring and wildly thrashing spirit beast in the middle, and under the violent wind, she muttered just a few words tonelessly. Just 10 breaths is more than enough. Zhang Mai's narrowed eyes then widened when he saw the sudden change in the slender young lady's aura, and he subconsciously clenched his fists tightly. He knew very well that once Qingyu made a decision, no one would ever be able to change it, and she had never liked anyone to interfere with her affairs. So no matter how worried Zhang Mai was feeling right at that moment, there was nothing he could do but to push down the strong impulse that was rising up inside. Just wait for a while more. And if anything unexpected really happens, even if he would be severely berated, he would not just stand idly by. But when he raised up his eyes to look, he came to discover that he had really been worried for nothing. The phoenix-like eyes that had glinted with that bright voracious thirst for blood narrowed. Her palms wrapped in blinding and searing golden-red flames curled in a claw. She thrust her hands straight into the sliced open head of the demonic centipede, which brought about a great spray of bright red blood to splatter all over, though not a single drop came to stain her pristine white clothes. The sound of flesh and bone being torn apart was absolutely bone-chilling. The demonic centipede was completely defenseless, the searing heat that felt like lava from hell burning it from the wound in its head all the way to the tip of its tail. The young lady's long slender fingers that had looked so weak and frail then closed tightly upon its spirit core crystal, trying to tear it right out from its body. Never had a spirit beast ever been so horrifyingly violated. Its body still alive, and made to feel long agonizing pain of having its spirit core being ripped out. A spirit beast's core lay in its spirit core crystal. Without its spirit core, even if it did not die, it would turn to become just a soft and limp bug without any attack capabilities, and its lifespan greatly reduced. Agony that was completely unimaginable. The demonic centipede was feeling greatly aggrieved. It did not understand why such a weak human could have suddenly turned to become so horrifying in an instant. The strange blazing heat continued to burn it from its insides, making it feel like its body was about to explode. Aggrievement filled the demonic centipede. It did not want to submit just like that. It wanted to struggle. It wanted to run away. But in the next second, starting from the tip of its tail, the flesh and blood started to disappear, spreading upwards inch by inch as it turned to bare white bones. What was even more terrifying was that it could clearly feel its death slowly approaching. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. No. Impossible. It is an 8th level spirit beast. An 8th level spirit beast. The highest level spirit beast in this lands. Is this end now before its path towards a new peak has even started? That's just unacceptable. The woeful roar of the trapped beast rang out as the last bit of darkness dissipated from the sky. When the sky brightened, turning fully into day, the demonic centipede stood erect in its spot, with only its skeletal remains left behind. In the young lady's hands, a bright red core crystal, as big as a baby's fist, flashed with an enchanting luster. The corners of her lips lifting up, she then said, "Ha, got it." Chapter 99. One alive? Dead. An 8th level spirit beast's core crystal was indeed extraordinary. Just holding it in one's hand, and one is able to feel the pulse of the spirit power within. Qingyu kept the core crystal away, and saw the handsome featured countenance of the youth, who had been watching her from not too far away, seem to relax in relief. Curling up the ends of her lips, she walked over to him. "How? I did not disappoint you, did I? Of course mistress is as powerful as she always has been." Zhang Mai said with his eyes turning into 2 smiling arcs. "I had thought that mistress would need to expend quite a bit of effort against that 8th level spirit beast." Qingyu shrugged her shoulders in helplessness. Who asked her to have so many divine artifacts cheats on her? Where are those two? She then came to realize that Yin Shiro and Yin Shiwu were not there, and she asked quizzically, "Oh, over there." The youth pointed casually with a finger. Qingyu followed the direction of the finger and saw the two young ladies lying side by side beside a boulder, their eyes tightly closed. "I was afraid that they were too timid, and it would scare them to death to see you become so brutal, so I simply knocked them out." Zhongmai explained lazily. Good job." Qingyu nodded. In fact, it really wasn't suitable for them to witness such a scene, as there would be too many things that would be hard to explain. She crouched down and reached her hand out, feel little Bei's pulse at his neck. She then opened his clothes at the shoulder to check the wound. Fortunately, she had acted quickly to control the poison, and the wound had not spread to become too large, but the corroded wound still looked rather grisly. To see that the youth's smooth skin had such an ugly wound, it was really quite an eyesore. Qingyu knitted up her brows. Although it would be rather painful, her long, slender, fair-skinned fingers summoned up fiery flame, and she brushed it lightly over the wound on the shoulder. Ugh! The intense searing pain jolted Qing Bei out of unconsciousness. Elixir fire has cleansing and detoxifying effects, and although the process was rather tormenting, but it was the best method to use at that moment. The youth's eyes that had been rather dazed turned clear in an instant, his body unable to move at all. His senses had become exceptionally sensitive and pronounced, and the only thing he was feeling at that moment was only that extremely excruciating pain. Besides gritting his teeth tightly together to endure it, there was nothing else he could do. He knew that Qingyu was helping him dispel the poison. Shortly after, the burning agony was finally gone. Qingyu looked at the wound that was already beginning to congeal and scab, and she breathed out a soft sigh in relief. She then took out a bottle of skin rejuvenating salve and applied it over the wound. With that, it should heal up in less than 2 days. Qing Bei's body was also slowly starting to be able to feel, and he was able to move. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He sat up from the ground and said in a grim voice, "Sis, I can't help having a feeling that this place is not just ordinarily dangerous." Logically, people who have come to Hades Canyon for rigorous training in the past had not come to encounter such a powerful and unusual spirit beast. And the entire place was just oozing with strange peculiarity, with dangers way above the middle average level. Already perilous enough to be placed among the continent's 3 most deadly places. Hearing him say that, Qingyu nodded her head in agreement and said, "I had felt that something isn't right about this place as well. Compared to what people who have come here before have said, the kind of spirit beasts and the environment we have seen so far is a completely different place entirely. I feel that we should leave this place as soon as possible." Qing Bei said with a serious expression. "We have retrieved quite a number of spirit beast core crystals throughout the trip, and although we have not reached the 10 days dateline, leaving this place prematurely is purely for the sake of our safety, before we encounter a situation that we'll not be able to defend ourselves against. Moreover, we have 2 deadweights with us." Chapter 99. 2 alive? Dead? Qing Bei said without any expression on his face, as he cast his glance to look at the 2 people knocked unconscious, just a short distance away from them. It seemed as if these 2 people had mostly been in an unconscious state throughout the mission. Tagging along with Qingyu for the training had been too blissful for them, that had them being so well protected. If it was up to him to say, he would have dumped them behind, so they would not be such a hindrance. Qingyu smiled helplessly without a word and then said, "Calculating the amount of time, about 6 or 7 days should have passed. Let's just wait till the Mao hour today and then leave." After Yin Shiro and Yin Shiwu were awakened, the few of them then left the highly dangerous place at great speed, leaving the massive and highly striking set of spirit beast skeletal remains behind them. Not long after they left, the ground suddenly began to shake violently, and the flat plains that had been filled with dense cracks then began to rise. With a particularly intense shiver, all the rocks and boulders in all kinds of various shapes and sizes then slid downwards, like they had all fallen down into a deep canyon, without kicking up even a cloud of dust. A moment after, that cracked in parched soil then continued to slide off, to slowly reveal a kind of smooth hide. That seemingly boundless plains was actually the back of a gargantuan beast. It was a beast that was bigger and wider than the enormous demonic centipede by several hundred times. It was as if it had laid dormant deep underground, suddenly awakened from its long deep sleep, and the many living things that had come to grow upon its back was now all falling and detaching off its body. It had a toweringly tall and massive body, for elegantly long and strong limbs, the head of a dragon and body of a tiger, a strange and unusual form. Right in the middle of its forehead was a thick and sharp horn, seemingly highly powerful, its pair of bright and expressive eyes shining with intelligence. Warm gusts of air snorted out from its nose, and the corners of its mouth actually split into a highly human-like smile that would send chills running through people. It looked at the skeletal remains of the demonic centipede, and though there was no more life in them, it could still sense the lingering terror and regret. The gargantuan beast then seemed to snort rather mockingly with a rumble in its throat, before it raised a paw to smash the demonic centipede's remains into dust that was then dispersed into the wind. Its eyes gazed forward, the meaning in them unclear. The way forward had been a whole lot safer for the group, and they did not come across any more strange encounters. They had been rather lucky to have captured 2 very low-leveled heaven-scuttling bunnies along the way as well. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The reason for that name was because they were a species of rabbits that could fly and burrow, most highly skilled escapists. But unfortunately, they had been met with Qingyu, who used her golden needles to pin them to the ground to immobilize them, where they then just looked up pitifully at her. Qingyu completely ignored those eyes. At such a low level, they didn't even possess core crystals. If not to be caught and roasted for food, what other great accomplishments were they hoping to achieve? Besides being just a bit bigger in size than regular rabbits, the heaven-scuttling bunnies were rather normal. But when she saw Qingyu skillfully gut and skin the rabbits to roast them over the fire, Yanshiro just could not take her eyes off her. It must be known that after the last time she ate the meat of the great spiked hog, she had completely lost her appetite for a few good days, and she was really looking forward to having some meat today. But seeing Qingyu prepare the rabbits in front of her after Qingbei set up a simple roasting rack, Yanshiro could not help but feel a little puzzled. Why do the two of you seem so well practiced in things like this? Both of you have not come out for wilderness training before. In her impression, Qingbei was a weak and frail cripple who dragged his handicapped body that had nothing but an intelligent mind around, and Qingyu was a weak and timid know-nothing, a decorative vase that did not dare to retaliate even when bullied. Chapter 99. 3 alive? Dead? But the changes that had come over these two people were as if they were 2 completely different people. If she was not looking at them straight in their faces, she might have thought that they were both imposters. Qingyu glanced at her looking rather amused. If you don't do it the first time, you will then never be able to do it. You have to depend on yourself when you come out here, and not anyone else. Look over there. Yanshiro followed the direction of her gaze, and she saw that Yanshiwu had already walked a distance away, and was bent over to gather some twigs and branches. Her face immediately grew a little ashamed. All of the others were doing something, but here she was just waiting for food. It did not seem very nice, and she did not even dare to raise up her eyes to look at Qingyu, but just went ahead to help Yanshiwu gather firewood. Compared to the unwilling reluctance the first time, she took the initiative on her own this time. Qingyu lowered her eyes and smiled to herself as she continued to prepare the rabbits she held in her hands. After she stuffed the spices inside the rabbits, she then poked sharp branches through them and placed them over the fire to roast after the rabbits were ready. All that was left to do was to wait for them to cook. On the other side, Yanshiwu was carrying a pile of tree branches and was about to come back when something suddenly caught her foot, which caused her to trip, almost making her fall. She quickly steadied herself and looked down, but as the sky was just too dark, she could not see clearly, so she crouched down and felt about with her hand. It was something warm and soft to the touch, and when she felt what seemed to be several long and slender fingers, her entire person froze. Yan Shiwu had always been steady and restrained from young, and she was not as timid as most other girls. Hence, when she realized what she was touching was a hand, she did not scream out in fright. Coincidentally at that moment, the clouds in the sky were blown further away from that area, and Yan Shiwu came to see the deathly pale face of a man under the moonlight. Her heart was greatly shook, and she fell back a few steps before she said with a slightly trembling voice, All of you come over here quick." Yan Shiro was not too far away from her, and when she came over, she went straight into an ear-piercing scream. Eek! A dead body! A dead body! Was it really that unusual to see a dead body in a place like this? Should it be something for anyone to freak out at? Qing Yu and Qing Bei went walking over when they heard the scream. Because she possessed good night vision, she saw it clearer than any of the others. A better half of the man's body was buried in the ground, and only his head and 2 hands were exposed outside. His face was terrifyingly white, but his countenance was elegant and suave, refined and handsome-looking. Although he was buried in the ground, but why did the posture seem so unbelievably strange? He was lying comfortably flat on his back, his arms seemingly widely spread out leisurely. His face did not seem to show any fear or pain, and if not for that ghastly-looking pallor of his face, anyone would have thought that he was just moonbathing there. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. A twitch tugged at the end of Qing Yu's brow. This was probably the only human they had encountered ever since they came here into Hades Canyon. It just seemed so very strange. Why had this man suddenly appeared here? She crouched down and stretched her hand out to check under the man's nose. When she reached her hand out and came to touch the man, her long upslanted phoenix-like eyes flared wide. He's still breathing? And flesh still warm? Just as she was crouched there with her face in shock, the deathly pale man suddenly wiggled his nose slightly, and after Yan Shiro let out a terrified scream, he opened his eyes. That smells good. The good-looking pair of ink jade-like black eyes turned, and his body then rose up, leaping right out of the ground, to sprint straight in one direction. Chapter 100. 1. Devilry must be afoot when things seem strange. The 2 succulent rabbits, roasting above the fire, were at that moment giving off a delicious and tempting aroma. The meat just getting cooked, the oil just beginning to drip from it to splash onto the ground. The man moved like the wind as he stretched a devilish claw straight towards the rabbits. The hand was denied its path when it was struck by a thin tree branch that flew through the air. He could not help but yelp out in pain, and turn around to stare with baleful eyes. Qing Yu was holding another sizable tree branch in her hand, as she came walking slowly over, tapping the end of the branch on her other hand. She then asked with an indiscernible smile, "You still have the cheek to glare at me? Those rabbits were caught by me, skinned by me. And have you even asked me before you reached your claws towards them?" That's right. Taking without asking is akin to stealing. To think that one who looked like a refined human would turn out to be so shameless, and without scruple. Yan Shiro chimed in from one side in indignation. She had been eyeing those rabbits for so long. How could she possibly allow a complete stranger, who just popped out of nowhere suddenly to steal the prize? Yan Shiro had just finished saying those words when the man's inky black eyes turned to look at her. There was less white in his eyes, his irises larger than normal, and it was a little terrifying to see up close. Although his facial features were quite good-looking, she still unconsciously shifted herself closer towards Qing Yu. The few of them in the group stared warily at the man, fearful that he might suddenly attack them. But after Qing Yu said those words, the man did not make any more moves towards the rabbits, and just sat there quietly to watch the glistening oil sizzle on the smooth and succulent-looking rabbit meat, his Adam's apple moving as he gulped longingly. His actions and demeanor just felt so indescribably strange, but as to what was wrong exactly, it was hard to put one's finger on it. Yan Shiro rubbed her arm and whispered softly, "What is it with this guy? Is he going to stay here and not leave? Or does he intend to share our food?" Towards the unwelcome guest who had popped right out of nowhere. Seeing that he was not doing anything else, but just watching without a sound, Qing Yu raised an eyebrow, and went on to ignore him. She then took out her dagger, and slid it over the rabbit meat a few times to make it easier for the meat to cook. while the man just watched her intently. It was a very strange scene to see. Qing Bei was a little worried as he leaned in closer to the young lady and said in a low voice, "Sis, this man just came out of nowhere out of the blue. Half his body was buried in soil like a dead person. That is already strange enough. And he is now just staring fixedly at the succulent rabbits roasting on the rack like a lunatic without doing anything else. It's really rather worrying, you know." Qing Yu cut off a rabbit leg and handed it over to him, as she said in an indifferent voice, "Don't bother about him. When it's the Mao hour, we'll just leave." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Bei knitted up his brows as he took the rabbit's leg and took a bite. The rabbit meat roasted with the specially mixed spices was tender and delicious, highly appetizing. But as his heart was still dangling in worry, he did not really pay much attention to how the meat tasted. On the other hand, Yan Shiro was watching eagerly, and it was until Qing Yu handed her a thigh that she then smiled contentedly. Even Yan Shiwu was seen to take a rare bite of the meat. It was not known how Qing Yu had prepared the rabbits, as even the fatty parts were not oily at all, but was tender and fragrant. The gaze of the man who was acting strangely then seemed to deepen bit by bit, like a terrifying storm was starting to brew up within, until a large meaty rabbit thigh was suddenly delivered right in front of his eyes, so close he could almost taste that alluring fragrance. The man instinctively froze for a moment, and he then lifted his eyes to look at her. "Eat it. I can see that you must be hungry, but you must not just snatch people's things like that in future. If you happen to meet more unfriendly people, they would have given you a good thrashing," Qing Yu said in an easy tone, with an eyebrow arched up. Chapter 102. Devilry must be afoot when things seem strange. That action had not only caused the man to be stunned, but all the others did not understand it as well. It was a good while before that man was able to react, his hands grabbing the rabbit leg to take big ravenous bites out of it, looking extremely hungry. The whirlwind speed he carried out his actions that shocked the few other people into a daze, and as the rabbit was big in size, its thigh was sizable as well. They had not even finished half of what they had when the man had already cleanly finished his share in an instant, even crunching up the bones with his teeth and gobbling it all down. Just how long has he not eaten meat? Qing Yu thought about it for a while, and then gave one half of a rabbit they still had remaining to the man. The other rabbit would be enough of the other 3 people to eat. As expected, the man wolfed down the large piece of rabbit meat in a few mouthfuls, finishing it lightning quick, which amazed the others so much they actually forgot to eat, but just stared at the man with wooden expressions on their faces. Seeing that he had finished eating, Qing Yu finally asked, "Who are you? Why were you buried under the soil?" It was probably because she gave him food to eat, and the man's gaze was no longer that malevolent. It was a while before his raspy voice spat out 2 syllables slowly. "Sleeping." Qing Yu was slightly taken aback by that reply, but she quickly recovered. "You mean to say that you were sleeping and was not buried under the soil?" The man nodded. "Then why were you sleeping under all that soil?" Qing Yu felt a little speechless. That was quite an eccentric habit. The man's gaze looked at her a little disdainfully, like she was asking him a highly irrational question, but he still replied with one word: "Comfort." There are really so many strange people who do strange things nowadays. This one here likes to imitate dead people by sleeping covered over with dirt. "How did you come to appear in here?" Qing Yu then asked the question that had been on her mind. Logically, the spot he had been sleeping in was the direction they had walked past coming here. So why did no one notice the man's presence before? The man was seemingly becoming a little impatient, but he still knew the rule that eating people's food should at least loosen his lips, so he stacked on quite a few words this time. "I found myself here upon waking up. Where are you from?" "I don't remember." There is a saying, one is deemed too talkative when the topic does not agree, and it was very true in this case. Qing Yu had not been snubbed so thoroughly ever before, and no matter how gifted a tongue she had, she just could not seem to find a common topic with this man. Anyway, he was just a passing acquaintance, and they might not ever meet again after they leave this place today, so it did not really matter that much. After their bellies were filled and comforted, The group of people sat by the fire to get some rest, taking turns to keep watch. And because of the arrival of their unwelcome guest, all of them were extra wary. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The strange man did not come any closer, but just kept a good distance away to watch them. It was probably because he had had abundant sleep that his eyes were wide open as he surveyed the surroundings curiously, like an ignorant child studying everything in their world. After a while, it might be because he was getting tired where his eyes slowly began to shut, to fall soundly asleep. When the Mao hour comes, they would then be leaving this place. But what they had not thought was that the entrance into Hades Canyon had at that moment completely disappeared, and the environment inside had undergone tumultuous changes, falling completely into night, where the light of day would no longer be seen, the already pitiful 4 hours of light no longer coming, with the entire place buried deep underground henceforth. The sands of time trickled bit by bit, and Qingyu sat there in meditation. Although her eyes were closed, her heart saw everything clearly. All right. Stop crying. What's the use of crying now? Qingbei grew angry when he saw her looking so useless, and went on to say viciously, "Go on and cry, but if you come to draw anything to us with your bawling, you can go deal with it yourself." Yan Shiro immediately stopped, not daring to cry anymore, struggling to hold back her tears. The Hades Canyon might have disappeared. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. After quite a long while, Qingyu stood up and stared into the pitch-black night as she said slowly, "Even our surroundings have changed, and the sky still has not turned bright till now. This place might have fallen deep underground. Otherwise, why would so many strange gigantic trees appear right out of thin air?" They were not given the luxury of time to go consider the situation any further, when a heavy and low rumbling booming slowly sounded in the distance. It sounded like some enormous beast, and the booming was the sound of its footsteps due to its overly large body walking. The moonlight grew hazy, and a terrifying bolt of lightning suddenly struck the ground, which caused a crack that was a good 10 meters deep to appear. Chapter 101. 1. Sheer cliff, but that was not the end of it. The crack continued to extend down deep into the ground and split into two, to form a wide divisive chasm. The chasm gradually widened, and as the spot she had been standing was a distance away from the others, by the time Qingyu was able to react, she was already separated from the other 3 people, them standing on one end, and she standing on the other side. "Sis!" Qingbei shouted anxiously, seemingly wanting to cross over to the other side. But the gulf was continuing to widen, and the ground was still shaking violently. Rock and stone came dislodged and fell down into the deep chasm, and there was no sound of them hitting the bottom. In his panicked state, it was all he could do to steady his feet. "All of you must protect yourselves well. I am fine," Qingyu raised her voice to say. The tips of her ears then perked up, coming to hear the dull booming thump coming closer. Her long upslanted eyes narrowed as she tried to ascertain the source of the sound. Finally, the thick and sharp horn was the first to be revealed before her eyes, and 4 slender limbs next. Its eyes big as bronze bells which emitted a blinding white light, its dragon-like head majestic and grand. Its body was unbelievably massive, almost blocking out the entire sky. The oppressive aura it exuded was so powerful it could cause one's chest to turn hot, and vomit out a whole mouthful of blood. Qingyu forcibly resisted against the oppression, pushing down the rank metallic taste at the back of her throat. What kind of a monster could this be that it possesses such immense power? The oppression in its aura is 100 times stronger than when the demonic centipede had gone berserk. The gargantuan-sized beast came closer with each step, its head seemingly hidden above the clouds, and it could well be imagined just how enormous the beast truly was. It then snorted derisively through its nose and said, "Humans, you've disturbed my peace." The group of people were startled. It spoke. That means it's a spirit beast that's surpassed the 8th level. Not only have they been trapped in here with no way out, they have now come to encounter such a powerful spirit beast. We're finished. We're surely done for this time. Yanshiro's face was horribly pale as she unconsciously gripped Yanshiwu's arm tightly, her fingers trembling in fear. Yan Shiwu's gaze was instead tightly fixed upon Qingyu, who was now a far distance away from them. Her heart filled with a sense of blind irrational trust that Qingyu would be able to deal with things, and that they would not die here just like that. We were already all prepared to leave, but we are unable to get out. We have no intentions of intruding and causing any affront. Qingyu had just come out from a battle, and her body had not fully recovered. Under such circumstances, she did not really want a heated clash. For the spirit beast to be capable of human speech, it must possess outstanding intelligence. If she's able to settle this peacefully, that would be best. Hearing that, the gigantic beast lowered its head to look at her. The ends of its lips raised up in a gleeful smile. Of course you are not be able to get out. No one in here will be able to get out, because this entire place has already disappeared. Disappeared? Qingyu was taken aback. What do you mean? The gigantic beast seemed to be in a rather good mood, as it went on to explain to her. This place is basically an illusory realm that was born when I went into a deep sleep while I was advancing to the next level, and now that I have awoken, the place would naturally then cease to exist. Illusory realm. Qingyu would never have thought that the Hades Canyon that had been around in these land for several tens of years would turn out to be an illusory realm that did not exist in reality. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew. But if the illusion has disappeared, then where were they physically now? No, that cannot be right. Qingyu's eyes then darkened. You want to trap us all in here? The gigantic beast looked at her, a little surprised, and then shook its head. A brightness shone in those intelligent eyes tinged with slight anticipation. I will kill off the other people in a while, and only you will remain behind, to forever accompany me. Chapter 101. 2. Sheer Cliff, how dare you? Qingyu's face was tinged with slight anger. Is there something wrong with this spirit beast's brain? It couldn't possibly have fallen for her, has it? There is nothing I don't dare to do. The gigantic beast burst out in laughter. Its gazes then darkened, and the sharp lone horn on its head began to crackle with an electrifying light. Another violent bolt of lightning shot towards a spot on the other side where Qingbei and the sisters were standing, and a chunk of the ground suddenly collapsed. If not for Qingbei's quick actions that pulled the two young girls away, they would have already fallen down into the bottomless chasm. The frightened faces of the two of them were devoid of all human color, as they gripped on tightly to Qingbei's clothes. On the other side, Qingbei's heart was beating madly from shock, and she said through tightly clenched teeth, "Despicable. To think that such a high-level spirit beast would use such cheap and lowly tricks against weak humans. Where the inspiring valor that should come from such a majestic spirit beast." However, the gigantic spirit beast did not feel the slightest tinge of shame from being berated. Weak humans will not live for long, and will in turn end up as food for spirit beasts. So why not just die earlier? Rest assured, down below is where my life's fire lie, and I guarantee that they will turn into ash in an instant, and they will not even feel anything. This brutal spirit beast was really so viciously cruel. At the moment when it unleashed another attack upon the people over on the other side, Qingyu completely ignored the violent shaking in the ground and tapped the points of her feet on the ground to leap over to the other side, and moved at an astounding speed to grab the few people, bringing them to a comparatively safer location back on this side. The gigantic beast did not know the reason why, but it liked Qingyu very much, and it wasn't ready to hurt her. When it saw that she had leapt over to the other side, it quickly tried to retract the lightning that was whizzing ferociously forward, but was still a step too late. Although Qingyu had dodged very quickly, but she was still struck on the arm by that lightning, and her arm instantly turned numb, unable to feel anything. The left arm that had been dislocated earlier, but she had not attended to it much, was now wounded in addition to the original injury. A portion of the snowy white robe was charred black, and bright red blood flowed down past her fingertips to drip onto the ground. Sis? Qingyu. The eyes of the few of them who saw that happen right before them immediately grew red-rimmed, brimming over with emotions. No matter how much she disliked Qingyu all this time, The always foul-mouthed Yan Shiro immediately broke into tears when she saw the wretched state of Qing Yu's arm, thinking it must be horrendously painful. If it wasn't because she wanted to save them, she wouldn't have been hurt. And at that moment, the power of the lightning blast that had already gotten 2/3 of the ground blown off suddenly caused the edge below Qing Yu to crumble into rubble. Qing Yu's body was stiff and numb, and in a moment of inattentiveness, her slender body went falling down together, her white robe billowing out with the rush of the wind as she fell, looking like a plummeting butterfly. Qing Bei's elegant eyes immediately flared wide, a surge of power seeming to gush up inside his body that was going to burn up his entire person. But the unnatural feeling in his body did not hold his attention, as all his focus was only pinpointed upon the young lady falling down into the deep chasm. Qing Yu? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He wanted to go save her without caring about anything else, but it was as if his body was rooted to the ground, unable to move at all. Despite him struggling with everything he had till green veins were bulging up prominently at his temples. No! Let me go! The gigantic beast had not expected that such a thing would happen, and it was stunned in shock, with panic coming to appear in its eyes. A shadow fleeted past its eyes, straight down towards the deep chasm. The gigantic beast stared with its eyes wide, not having been able to clearly see what that was. Thereafter, a mirth-filled voice then rang out darkly behind it. Little one, you've gotten yourself in big trouble this time. You better pray hard this time. Chapter 101. 3. Sheer Cliff. The gigantic beast immediately turned its head around with a snap, and saw an enchantingly handsome-looking man in red robes. It was taken aback for a moment before it asked, "My lord, what made you come here today? With such a great commotion you caused advancing a level, shouldn't I at least come have a look?" Bai Yan said with a click of his tongue. "Hurry up and keep this form of yours away. It's an eyesore. Aren't you already able to change your form?" Hearing that, the gigantic beast's body then shrank, and in a puff of green smoke, a tall black-robed figure appeared before his eyes, his face refined and good-looking, like a smooth and suave playboy. His eyes were rather unique, where the whites of his eyes were almost non-existent, its dark irises taking up a huge portion of them, a little unusual looking. "You don't look like you're any good at all," Bai Yan said, snorting a couple of times in contempt. This man was the one who had previously appeared so suddenly, the man who had wanted to snatch away their rabbits. "So it's you?" Yan Shiro glared at him with wide eyes, becoming so angry she forgot to be afraid, and admonished him fiercely. "Aren't you being too ungrateful here? To think that Qing Yu was so kind to offer you food seeing that you were so hungry. You have now caused her to fall off the edge of such a sheer cliff." The man knew that he was in the wrong here, and he just rubbed his nose without saying a word. Hearing those words, Bai Yan raised an eyebrow and asked, "Do you know who that young lady that fell off is?" The man's eyes lit up with joy when he heard her being mentioned, but then turned a little sad as he said, "Her roasted rabbit was delicious. I loved it. I wanted to keep her here to keep me company. It was not intentional." "Keep her as company?" Bai Yan looked as if he had just heard a joke, his plum blossom-like eyes shining dazzlingly, unable to hide his mirth. "You dare to even like her? You're really just the greatest spirit beast I have ever seen in my life. Ha ha ha." The man sought Bai Yan doubled over in laughter, and he just continued to just look at him in confusion. It was quite a while before Bai Yan was able to stop laughing, and he then raised his eyes up to look at the man. "I told you on the very day that I saved you that you will come to serve a person in future, and that person's position is above me, the Lord that I serve." The man nodded. "But does that have anything to do with this? The young lady that just fell off is my lord's benefactor who saved his life. Moreover, she is a high-grade elixir cultivator, the type whose single pill of level advancement elixir will allow you to become a super divine beast within a short period of time." Bai Yan looked at the man whose face was turning white bit by bit, his expression turning into one of horror. Bai Yan paused for a moment before he said, "Before we got here, he has already stated that if you turn out to be too blind to see, and come to harm a single hair on her, he will have you skinned." The man's seemingly tall and brawny figure then suddenly shivered involuntarily. On the other end, because of her draining strength and the fact that she was wounded, Qingyu was not able to breathe for an instant as she fell. Her weapon spirit in her body was frantically calling out to her. "Mistress, wake up and let me out." A weapon spirit would not be able to come out from the dimensional space when their master had lost consciousness. Seeing the frail state that Qingyu was in, Zhang Mai was frantic with panic, but in the next instant, the link with the outside world was cut off. Qingyu had fainted. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The people up on the cliff surface were all sitting on pins, with the probable exception of Bai Jiyan. It was till the sound of light footsteps sounded that everyone looked up and saw a tall and muscular man in a purple robe, carrying a slim figure in his arms, slowly walking towards them. When he came closer, they were all astounded at the man's countenance, which was exquisitely flawless in its beauty, the mesmerizing and soul-binding violet eyes under his brows exceptionally striking, his moist thin lips under that high-pointed nose pressed lightly together, like he was withholding his emotion, and the terrifyingly sinister aura emanating from his body driving chills through their bodies. Qing Bei was rather stunned as he looked at that man, and something flashed through his mind. This man. Chapter 102. 1. Slicing off flesh to treat the wound, he might not find the man's face to be familiar, but that pair of violet eyes that were one of a kind had left a deep impression on him. Back when he had gone to the gathered cloud loft, he had seen that pair of eyes fleetingly through the curtain veil, and the red-clothed man had addressed the violet-eyed man as his lord. The man that Qingyu saved was most probably this man here. He had not expected that the owner of that pair of eyes would have such outstanding looks and command such a powerful presence. It was clear that he was not any ordinary man, with just one glance. However, the scene where the slim figure of the young lady looked so small, while being carried in his arms, could really cause one to look at them with a surprised face, where one would come to feel that having such a proud and noble man, who must surely see the world with nothing but contempt, do something like this would just sully his very status. And for Qing Bei, it was also the first time that he was seeing his elder sister in such a weakened state. Lu Junyao's brows were furrowed up, and his face was more frightening than anything. Bai Jiyan came walking over in a hurry and asked softly, "How is she?" "Have a look at her left arm," Lu Junyao said in a deep voice. Bai Jiyan then turned his gaze onto the young lady's left arm, that was dangling on the outward-facing side. When Lu Junyao was walking towards them just now, that arm had been swinging limply with the momentum, like it had been broken. He stretched his hand out to feel the arm at the joint, and his gaze then turned around to glare viciously at the tall panicked-faced man behind him. "Are you even a man? Tui, do you even consider yourself to be male? How are you even able to strike at a dainty little young lady like this? Her entire arm has been completely dislodged." "I did not." The man tried to explain, looking highly aggrieved. "Stop denying it. I'll deal with you later." Bai Jiyan threatened fiercely. He then held on to the young lady's slender arm, and with one hand pulling while the other pushed, he popped the arm's joint back in place in an instant. Ugh! The young lady's face with her exquisite features creased up, as she let out a soft grunt from the pain. Lu Junyao then put her down and sat himself down on the ground, positioning her to lie against his body. He then very gently rolled up her sleeve, to reveal a portion of that arm with skin smooth as jade. But at that moment, a large part of the skin was charred black and stained with sticky blood, looking a little grisly. The few other people on the side could by now tell that the two men who had suddenly appeared were friends and not foes, and they seemed to be on rather close terms with Qingyu. So the few of them then came in closer. Qing Bei suddenly found that his body could move, and he hurried over as well, his eyes looking worriedly at the young lady who had her eyes tightly shut, and he then saw that rather frightening wound on her arm. With the amount of power the lightning blaze unicorn's lightning strike possessed, Qingyu's injury could be considered to be rather light. It could be seen from here that that fella really had not meant to intentionally harm her. The man whom the lightning blaze unicorn had transformed into was at that moment looking guiltily at the young lady. He then opened his mouth to say in a very soft voice, "My blood will help her to recover, but as for the wound, it must be sliced off. If it's delayed any longer, her whole arm would be crippled." Although the lightning blaze had only wounded the flesh, but its immense power had also inflicted internal injuries. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Upon hearing that the dead flesh needed to be cut off, Qingbei's brows knitted together. Is there no other way? To slice off such a large piece of her flesh, how painful would that be for Qingyu? Bai Ziyan arched up an eyebrow and looked at him. He had probably guessed that this was Qingyu's younger brother, and his attitude became a lot more polite than the way he had been when they first met. This is the most effective way, or the wound will just turn more severe. Hearing that Qingbei did not say another word more, Bai Ziyan's long slender fingers pull out a palm-length knife with a blade thin as a cicada's wing out of thin air, and he then cleanly sliced off the black charred flesh over the young lady's arm with one swift stroke that exposed a bloody layer of flesh below, the bright red blood immediately spilling out in a gush. Chapter 102. 2. Slicing off flesh to treat the wound. Bai Ziyan then skillfully scattered top-grade blood-clotting medicine over the wound, which stopped the blood from continuing to gush out in an instant. The pain from cutting off the flesh and the application of the medicine could well be imagined. Even though Qingyu was unconscious at that moment, the pain caused her eyes to flare wide open, her good hand gripping tightly on Lu Junyao's clothes, the luxurious cloth immediately becoming hopelessly creased. Upon seeing her eyes open, the expression on Lu Junyao's face finally smoothed out a little, and he asked in a soft voice, "It hurts very much?" The young lady's lips were pale from clenching her jaws tight, and upon hearing those words she subconsciously retorted, "You try it and see if it hurts." It was only after saying those words that she realized that something wasn't right. The man who was bandaging her wound right before her eyes. Bai Ziyan? Then the one who just spoke. And she was lying down against him. Realizing the position her body was in, she immediately stiffened a moment, and then tried to get up, but she was held down by the man's hand on her shoulder. "Don't move. Be careful not to tear the wound." Hearing that, Qingyu then settled down and did not move, but she still asked in puzzlement, "How did the two of you come to be here?" People of that level, coming out for rigorous training out in the wilderness would be as good as playing house to them. Hearing that while he was bandaging up the wound, Bai Ziyan then said teasingly, "It is all because a particular someone heard that you were coming here to such a dangerous place, and was afraid that you would bump into stuff and hurt yourself. So he had come whizzing his way here like he was on fire just to protect you." Qingyu was speechless. The words and tone of voice had been heavily laden, and one might really believe that to be really true. Lu Junyao then shot him a brief glance with eyes that hid a silent warning. Bai Ziyan was usually flippant with his words, and always making jokes, so Qingyu did not take his words to heart at all. But upon hearing him mention that this was a dangerous place, "What do you know about this place?" Bai Ziyan curled his lips up in a smile, and stretched his hand out to pick up the man who was taller and bigger than he was by the cuff like a kitten, and dragged him over. "Here. It's because of this fella here." Qingyu was a little surprised. "Isn't this that strange man who tried to snatch their food? What is he doing here?" Seeing her looking all confused, Bai Ziyan then said, "Don't judge this fella here just by his dumb and foolish outlook. He is actually a 12th level spirit beast, good and proper." Hearing that, Qingyu could not continue to remain calm, her face turning incredulous. "You've got to be kidding. A 12th level spirit beast? But aren't spirit beasts only able to change their forms when they reach level 15? This one here is a lightning blaze unicorn, a species of the most noble bloodline, one that possesses the unique ability to be able to change their form earlier. He is also the one who mistakenly wounded you earlier." Bai Ziyan had put it across in such a way seeking to have Qingyu plead for the spirit beast. If he were to really leave the whole matter alone till that brutal and merciless Lu Junyao got his hands on the spirit beast, the poor beast would surely fall back below the 10th level at the very least. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, so that is what happened. Qingyu's eyes grew thoughtful. That spirit beast who had turned into a man was looking really remorseful and scared at that moment, which really looked so different from the way he had been before. Bai Zhiyan then stretched his hand out to pass her a jade bottle. This is the lightning blaze unicorn's blood. It will be able to alleviate your injuries, and you should take it together with healing elixirs. This whole thing was really just a misunderstanding. I had left him in here to recuperate from its injuries, and it was really not easy for him to finally attain the 12th level. I would never have expected that it would come to injure you in the end. Qingyu was not that dense to not detect the meaning behind his words. She curled up the corners of her lips and took the jade bottle. Since it's just a misunderstanding, then we should just forget the whole thing. I'm fine now anyway. Hearing that, Bai Zhiyan enchanting peach blossom-like eyes then brightened as he looked gratefully at her, his liking towards her going up by another few points. The young lady's generosity is really admirable. Chapter 102. 3. Slicing off flesh to treat the wound. But now, how are we going to get out? Qingyu asked, looking slightly perplexed as she gazed at the darkness surrounding them. I could have taken them out through a dimensional space before, but now that I am injured. She had recovered a little by now, and she climbed to her feet. Lu Junyao maintained his original position, as he propped up his chin with a palm, and looked at her calm and unruffled. What do you think I came here for? With me here, would you still need to worry about such things? Qingyu then looked at him slyly. Why do you always appear in the very nick of time? You seem to be rather concerned. About my affairs? Just what does this guy here have up his sleeve? Lu Junyao curled up the corners of his mouth, and his seductive violet eyes flashed with eye-catching sparkle, before he then made a statement that had unclear meaning. Once a hunter has his prey marked, he would always employ all kinds of ways to make the prey let down its guard before it captures the prey in one fell swoop. Qingyu was a little confused, unable to comprehend what had just been said. Bai Zhiyan's face looked rather sleazy as he leaned in closer to say in a low voice, "Can't you see that he has you marked? So she is the prey." The corner of Qingyu's mouth twitched. Ever since she came to be on more familiar terms with them, she found that these two men were becoming more and more abnormal. From the moment that Yin Shiro saw Lu Junyao, that highly noble air and his unparalleled countenance had immediately made her swoon head over heels, especially when she how gentle he was towards Qingyu. Seeing him walk a little further off, Yin Shiro then quietly scooted over to Qingyu's side. Who is that man? Why have I never seen him in the capital city before? Qingyu arched up an eyebrow. What? He caught your eye? Yin Shiro's face flushed slightly red before she said coquettishly, "What nonsense. I was just asking. It's better that you do not know anything about him." Qingyu said with an indiscernible smile. That man there is an even more frightening existence than the Duke of Vast Seas himself. Yin Shiro was taken aback, but felt that Qingyu was hiding the truth. She immediately said in a rather displeased tone, "You don't need to tell me if you are unwilling to. Why do you need to spin such a tall story? That young master is clearly such a gentle and refined gentleman." Qingyu had no words for her. What kind of spell have you come under? Bai Zhiyan's extremely sharp ears caught the words gentle and refined gentleman, and he suddenly choked on his own saliva. To think that he would be able to meet someone with such a unique sense of judgment in this life. One who claims that the most brutal and tyrannical demon Lord Lu Junyao is a gentle and refined gentleman. To others, ripping a tear into the void was something that would severely drain one's cultivation, but to Lu Junyao, it was just a simple matter of moving his arms. After the entire group of them came out from the dimensional space, they found that they had come to reach the imperial capital in the blink of an eye. Before their eyes, it was the brightly lit-up gathered cloud loft, and it was already late at night. I can't believe that we have actually come back, Yin Shiro said excitedly as she held Yin Shiwu's hand and hopped in her spot. She then turned to look at the cold-faced man in his purple robes, and said in a coquettish voice, "Thank you, young master, for lending a helping hand. Ro-air cannot be more grateful." Bai Zhiyan felt goose pimples rise on the back of his neck hearing that nauseatingly coquettish voice. And the purple-robed man did not even blink when he then turned to face Qingyu and said, "Remember to make a trip to come here tomorrow." "Why?" Qingyu asked in bewilderment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao swept his gaze over her arms and said indifferently, "Let Bai Jiyan change the dressing for you. It will not be convenient for you with only one good arm." "That's all right, I can get little Bai to help me. It is best that things like this are handled by an elixir cultivator," Lu Junyao said with grimly. "All right then." Qingyu did not continue to refuse. "Anyway, it is just a change of dressing." Chapter 103. 1. Target to be top 5 the next day. Qin Feng, who received the news, immediately came rushing over. He had heard about the strange occurrence at Hades Canyon, and he had been highly guilt-ridden this entire time. It was after all because he had been just too careless when he failed to investigate into the place thoroughly enough, which then led them to fall into such danger. But the fact that they had finally managed to come back safely was something that made Qin Feng highly curious. As the Hades Canyon had sunk underground completely, how did they manage to come out? In regards to that, Qingyu had just told him very vaguely about it, that it was a friend who had coincidentally passed by the place who helped them. Qin Feng was rather dubious about the veracity of that claim, but then sighed in awe at the young lady's circle of friends. Such a powerful expert is probably someone from one of the higher realms. On the other side, although Qingyu had said that she was not going to hold it against the spirit beast, Lu Junyao was not going to be that easy. Those alluring violet eyes just stared darkly at the lightning blaze unicorn, till he was almost going to pee in its pants. Although a level 12 spirit beast could already be considered to be rather high among spirit beasts, but it was not even worth a mention before Lu Junyao. Back in the dark regions, there were a total of 7 super divine beasts, and the weakest one among them was already at level 15, and it was a young beast that had just been born not too long ago, already at level 15 from birth. Hence, this level 12 spirit beast was in his eyes no different from any common domestic pet. It was probably because the lightning blaze unicorn's form after his transformation was an eyesore to him. Lu Junyao went on to change him back into its original form, but restricted its size to be constrained, remaining only as big as a cat or puppy, which just made it look like a queer and pitifully ugly thing. Bai Jiyan sat at the side, his shoulders shaking uncontrollably, almost driven mad from trying to hold in his laughter. The scene was really just too funny for him to watch, although the spirit beast understood the rule that might made right very well. But he was after all still a spirit beast of the noblest bloodline, so being treated so humiliatingly, his heart immediately swelled with rebellious anger. He then came to discover that not only was he not able to assume his human form, he was unable to even transform himself back into his original gigantic and majestic shape, but confined in this small tiny body, neither human nor spirit beast. It immediately became infuriated. "What have you done to me?" Lu Junyao raised up a corner of his eye on one side lazily, his voice magnetic and soothing to the ears. "To let you experience what being a pet feels like for a period. From now onwards, you will sleep in there." Following the direction the man's gaze indicated, the lightning blaze unicorn turned his head to see. In a corner fully laid out with straw was a small-sized doghouse. "You're bullying people too much." The lightning blaze unicorn almost couldn't breathe from his rage. This hateful man was treating him like he would a dog. "Are you then people?" Lu Junyao snorted derisively. "Don't use your words wrongly. You better behave yourself for a while. Oh, I forgot to tell you. You will not be able to use any of your powers now, and are just a common and ordinary little pet. So if you go running outside and attract the eye of other spirit beasts, don't come back crying if you get bullied." Hearing that, the lightning blaze unicorn's beastly eyes widened as he stared, not believing Lu Junyao's words, and he rammed the horn on top of his head onto Lu Junyao's leg. In the end, the spirit beast yelped in pain and fell over to the floor, his eyes misting up with tears. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, why is this man's body harder than a rock? It hurts to death. His actions had proved to himself that he really did not possess a single bit of attack power. If he went out like that, even a stray mongrel would be able to kill him now. How pitiful was it for a powerful level 12 spirit beast to fall into such dire circumstances. Bai Ziyan's face was sympathetic as he shook his head. Only the heavens knew just how black-hearted the man Lu Junyao could really be. No matter man or beast, anyone who offended him would definitely eat the bitter fruit of consequences. But can this be seen as vengeance exacted blind with rage, all for his beloved? Chapter 103. 2. Target to be top 5 at that same time. The day for the Faint Mist Sect's quarterly internal competition was right on the brink of the brow. And those that were brushed off the charts would be demoted to become regular disciples, while the top best 5 positions would receive generous prizes. There were quite a number of disciples competing in the training hall. They had all become a lot more hardworking recently, and people often came in even before the sky turned bright to come secure places for themselves, as there was limited space in there. Only enough to hold 100 people, when there were over 200 disciples in the inner circle. Hence, fights often broke out to gain entry into the place with many incidents resulting in bloodshed. And among these 200 people and more, only 30 of them steadily held a position in the inner circle, with many of them being disciples, who caught up from behind, having defeated former inner circle disciples. So, there was always a wave of new blood that would bring about a change in the members of the inner circle's disciples every 3 months. The training hall was well equipped with weapons and other equipment. Cultivation speed in here was faster than other places, and one would not be disturbed. So the place was considered a highly prized location with great feng shui in the Faint Mist Sect. And in the courtyard behind the training hall, a large space had been cleared out in the middle that was surrounded by a ring of spectators, who broke out into bouts of cheers intermittently. Inside that space, a man and a woman were faced off in battle, and they were both wearing similar white uniforms, the lapel and hem of the clothes embroidered with cloud patterns, that looked highly elegant. Only the top 20 ranks among the inner circle disciples had these uniforms, while the rest of the inner circle disciples would wear full white uniforms without any patterns embroidered on them, and the regular disciples wore ones that were smoky green. The strikes executed by the two opponents were so fast it was dizzying to watch, unable to see their actions at all, and only the sounds when fists and palms clashed could be heard. The two opponents had not summoned up any spirit power at all, purely a match of close unarmed combat, the strength of their physical bodies causing the spectators to sigh in admiration. The ranking of these two have always been so close and equally matched. Who will take the lead this time? But with one ranked 18 and one 19, I feel that they are in a very precarious position, as they are very close to the bottom end. Moreover, I heard that there are quite a few of them, with rather strong cultivation in this current batch of disciples, and they will also be getting new recruits soon. The pressure they are facing must be really great. The pressure we face isn't that much less, you know. Instead of us debating about these people who are on the charts, we should be thinking hard on how we are going to defend our own position as inner circle disciples and not get squeezed out by all those other fellas. As they stood there arguing incessantly, a cold but pleasing voice suddenly sounded. All of you are so free that you've gathered here together to engage in idle chit-chat. Everyone was startled, and they all turned their heads around to look. A young lady with a countenance of unmatched beauty was approaching them with slow steps, her body surrounded by the aloof air of a goddess. Upon her fair forehead was an extremely eye-catching 5-petal flower bloom, which added a dash of glamour and color to that sacred and indecipherable face. It was until she reached them that everyone came to regain their senses. Although the beauty was really very beautiful, but that cold and aloof temper was not all that pretty. Senior Yen, read latest chapters at Wuxia World. This young woman was Yenning Luo in the flesh. As the Green Wave Kingdom's most prodigious female, she was ranked on the Faint Mist Sect's Inner Circle Disciples chart, 9th in position. And among the 20 people on that chart, there were only 4 who were female, the other 3 not within the top 10, with Yenning Lu being the only female among them, and she also the youngest in age. This made everyone in the inner circle to be fearful of her in some way or another. Moreover, she had gained the sect chief's recognition, and with her powers clear before them, everyone had to respectfully address her as Senior Yen, even though she was younger in age. But of course the main reason people were fearful of her was not just because she possessed great power, it was because she had another identity in there, the Vice Hall Chief of the Disciplinary Hall. Chapter 103. 3. Target to be top 5. The Hall Chief of the Disciplinary Hall was a woman over 40 years old and was always stern and strict towards everyone. But it was not known why she came to appreciate Yen Ning Luo very much and went straight to talk to the sect chief about it, who then bestowed the position of Disciplinary Hall Vice Chief on Yen Ning Luo. Once any of the inner circle disciples were found to have broken the sect rules or breached their discipline, she could immediately deliver punishment and just report it thereafter. Hence it could well be imagined just how fearful everyone was of her, afraid that she would find out about any of their indiscretions. So with her arrival, everyone quickly said a quick greeting, and they all dispersed like startled birds. As Yen Ning Luo always appeared haughty and aloof, she was not entirely all that popular with people, but with the disciples holding the top 20 ranks, her relationship with them was not too bad. To her, she would only be friends with powerful pugilists. Ning Luo, you've come out from cultivation seclusion? Upon seeing her approach, the two people battling then stopped themselves, and the young woman then opened her mouth to ask. Yen Ning Luo nodded her head. How's things? Has it been good for you recently? The young woman then replied with a helpless sigh. Not that great. Master has been exerting pressure on the two of us recently. Although we will not be kicked out of the sect if we get squeezed off the charts, Master said that we had better not go back to see him if we are going to bring him shame. Elder Mo is indeed a little more strict, so the two of you must really put in your best. Yen Ning Luo curled up her lips to say with a smile. Hearing that, the young woman then looking at her enviously and continued to say, I really admire all of you in the top 10. Even such a young lass like you is so powerful. You are younger than me, but you actually managed to go from being unranked to seizing the 9th rank straight away, within a single year. Have you just been hiding your powers all that time before? Yen Ning Luo bit her lips slightly and answered, I am merely at the bottom of the top 10 ranks. My target is to get into the top 5. Top 5. The young woman was a little shocked, before she shook her head lightly. Isn't that target a little tough? You must surely know that those guys there at the top are just legendary in the Faint Mist sect for so many years, and their position has never wavered before. Let's not mention those few right at the very top for a while. Even the 5th-ranked senior Su Liemo holds a record that no one in the Faint Mist sect has been able to surpass to this day, which was set when he challenged 300 expert pugilists in one day, and was not defeated even once. It was a record of 300 consecutive victories, which was absolutely no joking matter for anyone. Just by dueling so many matches without stopping alone would already drain one's body out completely already. Hence back when Su Liemo achieved the record of 300 consecutive wins, all the teachers had suspected him of taking some kind of restricted drug. But when they checked, he was completely clean, and he had done it by just his own power alone, which was just unthinkably incredible. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It wasn't as if no one had coveted the throne of being among the top 5. But with just Su Liemo alone who did not know exhaustion and held such maniacal powers, it was already more than what anyone who tried could overcome. So there was no need to even talk about the few who held even higher ranks. Among females, Yen Ning Luo was unequivocally the top one, but since the beginning of time, women have always been far weaker in physical strength than men, so surpassing those top 5 men, who possessed heaven-defying powers, would truly be a tough bone to chew, and not something that could be achieved in a heartbeat. Hearing that, Yen Ning Luo laughed softly. Since I had already come to climb up to the 9th position among so many hundreds, the top 5 isn't that much further for me now. Then, I wish you early success. The young woman chirped shyly. Yen Ning Luo turned around and walked away, and she then overheard the soft whisper behind her. It's a good thing to be confident, but overconfidence will then just be conceit. Chapter 104. 1. A guest comes to visit 6th young miss, you have a guest. Qingyu had just come back from outside, and the guard at the door immediately came forward to report in a soft voice. My guest. Qingyu raised up an eyebrow. She doesn't seem to have any close friends here in the capital city though. At that moment in the guest hall, Yen Su was entertaining a lady with a tall and slim figure, who was dressed in a light green dress. The lady had a pretty countenance, her bright eyes beautiful and absorbing, that looked highly intelligent. She commanded a noble and aloof air that made people often overlook her countenance, but they would then quickly become attracted to that unique elegant air she exuded. Lai Lai. Qingyu's eyes lit up, and she called out rather delightfully. Mu Lai heard the voice and subconsciously stood up to walk a few steps forward, before she found herself wrapped within a big hug by the approaching young lady. The coldly pretty face then reddened unnoticeably, and she raised a hand up to return the hug. Yen Su seldom saw the young lady looking so delighted, and he was rather taken aback by surprise. Qingyu, you are acquainted with young Miss Mu? When the servants had come to announce that a Miss Mu had come to visit, he had initially been rather puzzled. There was only one family clan surnamed Mu in the capital city, and they were a relatively small family clan, who were not very well known. So it was thought that they would not call on the manor for a visit so abruptly. But the servant had then said that it was the young mistress of the Mu family, that was the topmost elixir cultivator family throughout the lands. Although this Mu family kept a low profile in a remote region, at the common border shared among a few countries, but their reputation as the topmost elixir cultivator family far precedes them, known far and wide. Especially the current young mistress of the Mu family, whom was though still a very young lady, was already known to be a rare genius skilled in both medicine and martial arts, the most outstanding talent among Mu family's younger generation. She was after all a young lady who had just turned 18, but the steady and stalwart flair she exuded often made people forget her young age. Qingyu held the young woman's hand, and then said to Yen Su with a smile, Father, this is my good friend, I'll entertain her. If you are busy, just go ahead with your own tasks. Seeing that, Yen Su nodded his head. All right, you ladies will find it easier to talk. Take good care of young Miss Mu. Upon saying that, he then nodded at Mu Lai and he then left. Mu Lai watched Yen Su's figure walk far away, and then turned her gaze back. The relationship between the two of you doesn't seem that good. Although Mu Lai herself was not really all that close to her father as well, but her situation was still at least at the level where her father was benevolent, and she the daughter filial. But the interaction between Qingyu and Yen Su was a little more queer. One would not really see anything wrong on the surface, but the highly distant manner of speech and actions between them could not be concealed. Or it should be said that it's Qingyu who did not seem to be that warm towards her father. That one point would naturally not escape her, who had always been sensitive in thought. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You hearing that? Qingyu's brow lifted up and she said seemingly unconcerned. I wouldn't say it's not good, but just not really all that bad. As that was their family affair, Mu Lai did not go on to probe any further. That's right. Why have you suddenly come to the imperial capital to look for me? Qingyu asked in puzzlement. I came here purely just to see the place you live in. Mu Lai said, her gaze gentle as she continued. Because we saved the assassination temple's chief, they delivered a whole lot of things to the Mu family the very next day. I think they were unable to find you, and they then just sent the gifts to me instead. I'll have someone bring it here for you next time. Huh? Qingyu was taken aback a moment before she waved her hands in front of her. Don't. You just keep those things. There are so many people in your family clan, and cultivating elixirs calls for the use of many precious herbs. Moreover, the price of herbs are currently so high in the market. So just keep the things with you, and use them to procure more elixirs and medicines. Consider them as blessings to the people. Chapter 104. 2. A guest comes to visit. The Mu family's repute had always been very good out there, and they had even opened a pharmacy just for the poor and destitute, giving away medicine for free. The pharmacy had been open for about 5 to 6 years. Hearing Qing Yu's words, Mu Lai's beautiful eyes shone and sparkled. You will truly become the one who silently spread blessings onto the people. Does this girl even know how much precious and priceless things the assassination temple sent? It is enough to buy up several busy and flourishing streets. And here she is giving it all away so nonchalantly. And back when she had killed that 6th-level spirit beast in its lair, Qing Yu had also gifted her the core crystal with a blink of an eye. It must be known that if a 6th-level spirit beast's core crystal were to be put up for auction, it would at least fetch several good millions. But she had just casually said, "You need it more than I do." Indeed, she had bet with those people in her family clan back then that if she was unable to bring back a 6th-level spirit beast's core crystal, she would give up on her position as the clan's young chief. So how could she afford to lose? She most definitely cannot lose. Hence, even if she fought to her last breath, she must kill that spirit beast. She had been incredibly proud from birth, and she would never bow down before anyone except towards Qing Yu. Mu Lai then suddenly remembered something rather belatedly, and she then opened her mouth to ask. That Yanning Luo seems to be a member of the Faint Mist sect, and she seems to hold a rather high position in there. You will not be able to come back for the next 2 to 3 years at least when you join the sect. Wouldn't you be seeing her very often in there? Ever since she came to know Qing Yu's identity, Mu Lai had come to understand quite a good amount of things about her. She knew that Yanning Luo had always disliked Qing Yu, and seeing those two people would be seeing each other quite frequently. What would happen if Yanning Luo comes to make things difficult for Qing Yu? Qing Yu raised an eyebrow. That probably won't happen. She is an inner circle disciple, and I will surely just be one among so many regular disciples when I get accepted. With such a great disparity in position, we will definitely not see each other, even once every few months. She was going in there not because she wanted to learn anything, but as there were just too many secrets in this body she was inhabiting, she wanted to find some clear answers. And as for the reason why she was going to the Faint Mist sect, that was because there seemed to be a voice that was telling her to go there. Mu Lai felt that those words sounded rather logical as well, and she then nodded before she said, I will be staying here in the imperial capital for a period, so we can meet with each other anytime, whenever there's a need. What? You have business to take care of here in the imperial capital? Although Mu Lai had said that she came here to see her, but Qing Yu could see that something was not right with her demeanor. Even though Mu Lai had hidden it well, but she had still picked up a few clues. What happened? Mu Lai was taken aback a moment, before she then shook her head lightly. There's nothing. It's just that I have never come to the Green Wave Kingdom's imperial capital, and I wanted to come see the scenery here. You are lying, Qing Yu said as she looked at her with her brows knitted together. As the young chief of such a large family clan, there are so many clan affairs you have to deal with on a daily basis. How can you possibly have the time for something so frivolous like sightseeing? Tell me, what happened? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You in her past life. She didn't even need to talk about how many things big and small she had had to attend to after she took on the position of family head. But just the period when she had been picked as the heir alone already gave her so much pressure that was just impossible to describe. And there were so many branches in the Mu family watching her every move. The slightest misstep from her and her position as the young chief of the family clan would be snatched from her. Moreover, having to stand firm against the dogma of having a female assume the position of young chief, she would have to overcome many obstacles. Everyone might be highly respectful on the surface. No one knew what kind of vicious plot people might be hatching to have her dead. Such filthy, nauseating things that went on inside large family clans were not new to Qing Yu in the slightest. Seeing Mu Lai looking like that, Qing Yu faintly felt an ill premonition rise up within. Chapter 104. 3. A guest comes to visit. Seeing the young lady's worried look on her face, Mu Lai's heart sank slightly deep inside, and she picked up the cup of tea on the table to pour it down her throat in one gulp, seemingly seeking to alleviate the emotion she had suppressed inside her heart for the past few days. My father might not have long to live. Her tone of voice was extremely calm, so calm that one could almost not detect any emotion at all. But her words had caused Qingyu to be greatly startled. How? The Mu family head Mu Qingtian was merely only about 40 years of age, and was an amiable and kind person. He was also a highly respected gold-grade elixir cultivator. How did he come to have something bad happen to him so suddenly? Qingyu did not want to think that things was really that bad, but when she saw the usually steady and haughty woman show such a helpless look on her face, she could not help but ask in a gentle probing manner. It was done by your own people? Mu Lai's gaze grew sharp, and her long slender fingers made crackling sounds as they clenched up. Her lips then parted slightly to say, if my father had not been too soft-hearted back then, he would not have to suffer this unexpected calamity now. He was ambushed when he was advancing in level and suffered violent backlash. Not only his vitality had been severely damaged, his cultivation had fallen from the gold grade 3rd level to the silver grade 8 level in just a few days, a good 5 levels, which turned half his hair white. This was how an elixir cultivator misused the practice. They were able to employ elixir cultivation techniques to make their body constitution become stronger than normal people, causing them to look much younger. But when their vitals are damaged, their cultivation levels would continuously drop, speeding up their aging as their health declined. When their cultivation levels dropped to the very bottom, their lives would then be snuffed out. Hearing her words, Qingyu felt a wave of emotion. She had not thought that such a big incident would happen in the period that she went to the Hades Canyon for rigorous training. Lai, just let me know if there is anything I can do to help. Qingyu said seriously as she held Mu Lai's hand. She had probably come such a long way here to the imperial capital because she wanted Qingyu to offer her some spiritual support and mental comfort. She was after all just a young girl in her teens, and to have something so severe happen to her father, which led to her having to hold up such a large family clan, with hungry wolves eyeing covetously at the sides, the immense pressure she must be facing could very well be imagined. The fact that she had not collapsed under that kind of pressure already showed how strong she was. In the past, she would only be able to hide things like this in her heart. But now, she has a friend that she could share her heartfelt thoughts with, and she would not have to hide it till it felt like she could not breathe. Qingyu, I want to save my father. Mu Lai suddenly lowered her eyes and said softly, but when he came to know the method that would be used to save him, he told me he would rather die than to accept my help, and I had a big fight with him about it. Qingyu's face looked hesitant for a moment. Hearing her words, the method Mu Lai wanted to use to save her father did not sound like a good idea, or the Mu family head would not get so worked up over it. I searched through the texts in the library. My father's condition is cultivation energy dispersion. One will only need to take a measure of spirit essence from his closest kin and feed it to a little ghost capable of gathering cultivation energy. Wait for 49 days, gather back the energy essence that the little ghost would be losing, and let my father absorb it to cure him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Have you gone mad? Without waiting for her to finish, Qingyu interrupted her sharply. Do you know how venomous that method really is, and how much it tears at one's cultivation? If you do that, living with an incomplete soul will not only rob you of your affinity with being an elixir cultivator, you could very possibly be reduced into becoming a puppet for an exorcist. But I cannot just watch my father die like this. Mu Lai clenched her fists tightly. The Mu family cannot do without him. Then it can do without you? Qingyu retorted with a glare. I will not allow you to sow something like that. Mu Lai's brows furrowed together. But, no buts. Since you came to me, I will help you solve it no matter what. Qingyu said coldly. Who asked you to have such a nasty temper that made you just one friend here? Who will help you if I don't? Chapter 105. 1. Paradise City. Mu Lai's eyes grew unnoticeably red-rimmed. Never had she thought that there would be a day that such a proud girl like her would come to trust and depend on someone so much. And neither had she ever thought that she would be so fortunate to have a friend that cared about her as much as she cared for them. That caused a corner of the rock-hard heart of the always cold and aloof girl, who had always kept to herself, to slowly melt and soften. There are so many rooms here in the Eternal Peace Duke Manor. I'll have someone get one ready for you to stay here. There is no way I am letting you go stay outside in an inn, after you came such a long way here. Qingyu did not wait for her to reply, before she went ahead to make the arrangements. Mulai was rather taken aback, but she did not refuse, but just merely curled up her lips in a smile. She had always been the one acting dominantly over others, and she had never thought that she would see the day that someone could be so bossy and tyrannical towards her. Although this kind of tyranny was something she would gladly accept. After saying that, Qingyu immediately instructed the servants to get the room ready. It was only after she was finished with making the arrangements that she came to realize something. You said that you were thinking to use your spirit essence to keep a little ghost capable of gathering energies. From what I know, only exorcists would keep and rear little spirit ghosts with them. Did you come here to the imperial capital to find an exorcist? Mulai nodded her head. I received news that there is a highly mysterious ghost cavern here helmed and controlled by a powerful exorcist, but no one knows where the entrance into the place is. Ghost cavern? Qingyu was a little surprised. How can such a place exist in such close proximity to the bustling imperial capital? Isn't he afraid that he will be discovered and his nest gets busted? Because the place is so mysterious, it still has not been discovered till today. So I was thinking of getting a person I know from this area to help look into it for me. Mulai sighed mournfully. No matter what, I must definitely save my father. Don't worry. I will help you. Qingyu said reassuringly as she patted Mulai on her hand. Her eyes then flashed with a glint, suddenly having thought of a good idea. Hence that very night, Bai Zhiyan, who had just finished battling Lu Junyao over a few games of chess, quickly felt that something wasn't right the moment he returned to his room. There was a small little shadow was crouched above his window. What in the world is that? It was only when he went closer that he saw that it was a cute and adorable little creature, whose body was completely snowy white. It had a pair of blue eyes large and round, its tiny ears sharp and pointed, and a short bobbly tail. It looked both like a cat and a fox at the same time, and it was just so unbelievably beautiful and adorable that even Bai Zhiyan was almost swooning from its cuteness. The little fellow was just crouched there obediently, looking rather bored as it puffed up its cheeks to blow bubbles. Little cutie, where did you come from? Bai Zhiyan exclaimed softly, his face looking highly benign and harmless as he approached the creature. The little beast blinked its large eyes and stretched a paw up to ruffle its ear. Seductive and evil looks, dressed in full red robes. This should be the right guy. As that thought rose up in its mind, it then stretched out its tiny paws and brought them up right in front of his face to reveal a tiny ball of paper right before his eyes. Bai Zhiyan was stunned for a moment, unable to react at all. The little beast looked highly impatient as it then rolled its eyes before it tossed the ball of paper onto the table. Its tiny body then shot like a bolt that arced through the sky in a beam of light, disappearing in an instant. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. So fast. Bai Zhiyan snapped back to his senses, and then turned to look at the ball of paper on the table. Who sent that? He had just picked the ball of paper and spread it open, but had not even had the chance to read it when he saw Lu Junyao pushing the door to come in. His eyes gazed lazily out of the window as he then asked, "What was that just went out from your window? How did you know?" Bai Zhiyan asked in bewilderment. In the end, his question immediately earned him a contemptuous rebuke. You did not even feel that clear fluctuation of spirit energy at all. Chapter 105. 2 Paradise City. Just great. Ever since regaining back his power, he doesn't even need to conceal his sarcasm at all now. Bai Zhiyan was so infuriated he wanted to just ignore him completely. His eyes turned to look at the piece of paper in his hand, and an eyebrow lifted up slightly, the expression looking a little mischievous. It's already so late at night, and the lass is asking me out for a secret meeting? Hearing that, Lu Junyao subconsciously peeked at the contents on the scrap of paper. There wasn't even a single word on it, but just a picture of a feather on it, which was drawn looking highly lifelike. It's that little fox Qingyu. But how do you know she's asking you out? What kind of a deeper meaning can a mere picture of a feather have? Bai Zhiyan curled up his lips in a smile and said, "This is a long-held secret among us elixir cultivators. Outsiders will not be able to tell what it means." Upon saying that, he scattered a layer of powder from his fingertips. The feather immediately changed shape, and a few words manifested. Afterlife Loft. Understanding then dawned upon Lu Junyao when he saw the words. He had thought that there was a secret code or something, but it was just a trick that they employed. That place sounds a little familiar, Bai Zhiyan said as he rubbed his chin with a finger thoughtfully. After rubbing it for a good while, his expression then became slightly startled. Isn't that the territory of that kid? What? Lu Junyao could not be bothered with any other trifling details, but was just curious what kind of a scheme Qingyu had up her sleeve. That kid from the Bellied family. When he came here the last time, I almost killed him. Bai Zhiyan said in reminder, regarding a certain person's complete indifference towards all and everything, leading him to have no impression of anything. It was something that Bai Zhiyan knew quite well. Hence, this person also had absolutely no idea just how many enemies he had come to make back in Cloud Heaven as well. With Bai Zhiyan's reminder, Lu Junyao finally remembered something about it. What is it? What has the little fox asked you to go that kind of a place for? When you do not know, how could I know anything about it? Isn't her relationship with you better than with me? Bai Zhiyan answered with a shrug of his shoulders. We'll know when we get there. That lass never turns up for no reason, and something must be up with the invitation coming in so late. Lu Junyao agreed with a grunt, his face stern and serious. I'll go with you. I'll be able to help if anything happens. Bai Zhiyan was stunned. Can you please turn back to your normal self? Ever since they came to stay here in the Constellation Lands for so long, this great demon lord has been turning more and more kindly and thoughtful for others. He has even learnt to take the initiative to extend help to others. All the others would surely be shocked to death if they knew. Is this fella thinking he's going to help by committing murder and arson? Although it was said that the Constellation Lands was a realm that lowest in position, but it contained perilous places that harbored ferocious beasts that were unimaginably dangerous, and also mysterious and luxurious places known as paradise cities that were in no way inferior to those of higher-level lands, like the Afterlife Loft, splashed in dazzling and splendorous gold and jade, of the highest luxury everywhere. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The vast gambling hall on the first floor was a boiling pot of people's voices, the loud cheers sounding incessantly in one's ears. It looked like some people were rather lucky tonight. And in contrast there were also those who were especially unlucky, losing so badly, they had hocked even their clothes, their faces and necks red as they cursed and swore in rage. On the side was the arena, where a brawny man towering with his 2-meter height was taken down by a thin-looking youth with just 2 quick strokes, a loud dull crash sounding out when the towering figure crashed to the ground. The large figure was indignant, and wanted to sneak an attack, thinking to catch his opponent off guard, but was sent flying out with a kick from the youth that broke his neck, and he breathed his last. The youth laughed sneeringly, his eyes disdainful as he then turned around to walk off without looking back, his attendants quickly catching up to follow behind him. The spectating crowd erupted in a bout of jeers. People died in the Afterlife Loft every day. That was no mere rumor. Chapter 105. 3. Paradise City. And before today, people who died at the hands of the brawny guy numbered at least 80 if not 100. And now, it was his turn to die in the arena. The first floor was highly chaotic, the atmosphere in the gambling hall fiery, the arena brutal and cruel. But on the other side, there were many dance hostesses, each wearing more revealing clothes than the next, strutting around. Every single one of them gyrated their limber bodies decadently to the beat of melodious music, the thin silk covering their bodies fleetingly exposing the beautiful curves of the bodies, that was exceptionally seductive and eye-catching. Among them, not only were there highly coquettish women, there were also tall and handsome-looking youths. Even though they were male, the attractiveness of their looks and well-shaped bodies were in no way inferior to the ladies. There were guests there who were more into a different kind of taste, and hence the youths were also highly popular as well. As long as one possessed the right conditions and sufficient wealth to entice them, they could either present a dance or a song for them personally, or one could have them spend a night of bliss and rapture together, with many choices readily available. They were there to satisfy any kinds of requests from their patrons. A balding and obese round-bellied man with a highly greasy and pudgy face then came walking down from one of the gambling tables glowering. He trotted over to go right before a youth with an alluring body, and pressed a stack of golden tickets right into the youth's hand. The value for each of those tickets was 1,000, and that was at least several tens of thousands in total. The youth's beautiful face then broke into an enchanting smile. It was not known what the balding man said to the youth, which caused the youth's face to look slightly abashed. But after the man added another stack of golden tickets, the youth acted coyly a moment before he obediently leaned himself right into the pudgy man's arms. The balding man immediately could not seem to wait as his heart grew capricious, and before all the countless pairs of eyes in that main hall filled with people, his large mouth smacked right onto the youth's pink lips, his thick pudgy hands starting to rove and grope all over the youth's soft body, eliciting a low embarrassed moan out of the youth, providing a highly explosion scene right in the open. There were many people surrounding them, but those two people did not seem to be bothered in the least, seemingly becoming even more aroused. The balding man even pressed the youth down onto a table, ripping away at the obstructive thin silk, like he was completely unable to hold himself back from doing something people would not be able to take their eyes off from. The youth was very cooperative, and his two long fair-skinned legs spontaneously tangled up around the man's body, looking highly submissive like the man could do anything he wanted with him. The atmosphere in there immediately became so sensational, it was spiraling out of control. On another side of the hall, a cold-faced man in black robes was pulling another man in white robes, and they went inside a private room without a word. "Why are we here in such a place?" The man paused between every word, like he was speaking through tightly clenched teeth. The man in white robes who was pulled inside possessed a countenance of flawless beauty that could make people gasp, his beautiful pair of phoenix-like eyes smiling mischievously. "Lai, are you feeling embarrassed?" These two people are Mu Lai and Qingyu, who were disguised as men. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Mu Lai had not known for what purpose they had to dress up as men, but she knew now. This place is just too dangerous. Even dressed as men, when they had come in, they had already been scrutinized from head to toe by all kinds of strange gazes. Not to mention if they had come in here as women, they would definitely have been skinned alive right on the spot. The people in here were just too terrifying. Just that one scene out in the main hall just now. Any normal person would not be able to be so utterly shameless, but those two people had put on such an erotic show out in the open. And it was even a gay show. Absolutely disgusting. Qingyu looked at the black-faced girl in front of her, and almost could not hold in her laughter. What a rare sight. To think that the face of that glacier mountain, that would never change, could actually show such intense emotion. Alright, don't be mad already. I had not known that this place would get so chaotic. Anyway, we came here for serious business this time, and we'll never come here again in future. Qingyu said reassuringly, feeling rather amused. Chapter 106. 1. Pulled underground. Mu Lai's face sank, her eyes looking a little complicated. This little lass is younger than her by several years, so how is she seemingly so easy and familiar? In a place that was such a messy hodgepodge of all kinds of crooks, and people like she often frequented them? And with that scene earlier, no matter how cold and aloof she could be, she was after all still a young lady, and could not help feeling embarrassed by that. But this little lass, had stood there watching it all with such great interest. If she had not pulled the young lass away just now, they would surely have seen something that would give them styes. Mulai was wearing a set of full black robes, her long hair bound up high on top of her head. With her original cold and aloof mannerisms, there was nothing out of place seeing her dressed up as a man. Instead, it gave her a sense of suave indifference, which attracted many pairs of eyes among the ladies. One didn't even need to mention Qingyu at all in this case. She had always dressed herself up in male clothes when she went out for convenience, and with her exquisite and flawless facial features, she just needed to conceal a bit of her young femininity, which then gave her a look of devil-may-care elegance. Her long upslanted alluring phoenix-like eyes so captivating. She looked so outstanding that many could not take their eyes off her, attracting the hearts of both male and female. She was clearly such an enchanting and beautiful young lady, but she did not show any single characteristic of femininity in the slightest dressed up like that, presenting herself to look just like a real man, thoroughly, enchantingly handsome, elegantly sexy while exuding an unconscious tinge of proud nobility, the cream of the crop among men. Mulai had been caught off guard and her heart had also wavered a moment before she silently cursed inwardly, calling her a demonic temptress, but went on to say aloud, "I have come to the afterlife loft a few times before. On the surface, it's a guest house and restaurant, but it's highly chaotic and messy inside, where all kinds of people gather. There are no lack of fugitives, killers, all kinds of brutal and fierce felons in here, and hence the world outside gave the afterlife loft another nickname, called Sin City." Saying it's a city was no exaggeration at all. The afterlife loft was so vast that its territory stretched out 1,000 miles around, and not only was it 9 stories high, there were also 3 levels underground that no one knew about. All the villains entrenched in this place all year round, as the moment they step out of the afterlife loft, the only thing that awaited them would only be death. So as time passed, they then become a part of the afterlife loft, assuming the role of a protector. If anyone tried to create a ruckus and stir up trouble, they would not hesitate to kill or kick those people out. There are even those who found a new lease of life, where through their incredible luck at the gambling tables, had turned into extremely rich tycoons, or some who won countless battles in the arena that gained them rare and priceless treasures, to become one of the main pillars of the arena fighters. In short, they began to slowly sink into this peaceful world of theirs, one filled with riches and glory, fine wine and beautiful women, always immersed in hazy drunkenness, living their lives as happy as the gods, no longer having to be oppressed and be filled with jitters running for their lives all the time. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The afterlife loft was dangerous and mysterious, and yet exceptionally safe at the same time. Many deals that must not be seen were conducted in here, and they did not have to worry about it being leaked at all. The soundproofing in the private rooms were all very well constructed, and it shut out the raucous clamor outside in an instant, almost feeling like it separated one into an entirely different world. Qingyu slowly poured out a cup of tea, and she was just about to take a sip when her suddenly nostrils flared slightly. The corners of her lips then curled into a smile, and she put the cup down. The afterlife loft was really quite interesting. Mulai saw her actions, and she picked up the teapot to bring it closer, before she took a suspicious whiff of its contents. Her face darkened. "There is the scent of forgetful creek grass in here." Forgetful creek grass, as its name implies, is a herb that can cause a person to temporarily lose their memory. It is not harmful when taken in small doses, but if taken over a prolonged period, one will gradually lose his mind, and slowly sink deeper and deeper till he becomes immersed inside his own world. Chapter 106. 2. Pulled underground. What kind of a scheme is the afterlife loft plotting? To think that they would add such things into their tea. Mulai immediately wanted to go find the manager of the place to question him, but was stopped by Qingyu, who called out to her, "You can save your breath. I do not think that they have been doing this for only a day or two. Having you go expose them would only enrage them from being humiliated." It will only bring disadvantages towards what we came here to do. Mulai knitted up her brows and gave up on the idea after thinking about it. Is the entrance to the ghost cavern really here in the afterlife loft? You must believe in my sensory powers. There is an extremely dark and evil aura in this place, and if my deduction is not wrong. Qingyu paused for a moment before she tapped the point of her foot on the floor. It is right below here. Mulai's body stiffened, thinking that it was unbelievable. The rumored 3 levels underground? Qingyu shook her head and was seemingly deep in thought for a moment. It seems to be even deeper down. Then how are we going to go down there? Mulai's face was looking rather conflicted as she then said, we do not have the ability to delve through the ground, and moreover, if it's in a very deep place, it will be very dangerous with just the 2 of us here, and we might even suffocate down there. That is why I called for someone who will be able to help us to come. Qingyu then opened her mouth to say. Mulai was a little surprised. When did you do that? And the thing we are about to do here is highly dangerous. If the other party comes to be implicated by us, will you? Qingyu laughed softly and said, you do not have to worry. The helper I called in is highly reliable and is highly skilled. On the other side, because Qingyu's note had not stated any other information, but just the name of the place, Bai Zhiyan was not overly concerned, but to merely ask the gray-robed man to come along, who asked him to be good for nothing else, but just possess incredible skills. Although the afterlife loft was well known throughout the entire lands, few people knew its exact location. It was because its location was really just too far remote, so it was very hard to find it even with it was such a prosperous place. Bai Zhiyan and his group were delayed for a while, and they only came to find the place after asking people for directions. They could have just used dimensional teleportation, which would bring them there in a single breath, but they tarried all over the place for a good hour. Before their eyes, a massive building was revealed before their eyes, layer upon layer of hill slopes surrounding it, which made the entire place look even more impressive. To think that such a prosperous city would exist in such a location, sticking out like a sore thumb out here in the wilderness, which was just so surprising to see. Bai Zhiyan unconsciously shivered with a chill and he said, what kind of a fetish is that kid Bellied Jiran hiding? Why would come to open an inn in a dumb place like this? It's so creepy here at night. Isn't he afraid of attracting ghosts? The gray-robed man yawned lazily, looking very sleepy as he said, you're right about that. There's quite a number of wild ghosts around here. A few of them had even just gone in. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, what did you say? Bai Zhiyan's face was one of horror. How many went in? Bai Zhiyan was not able to see strange sights like that. But the gray-robed man was born with the yin-yang eye which allowed him to see things that the naked eye was unable to see. He swiped his palm lightly over his face, and the undulating ripple of energy appeared before him like a picture. He raised his eyes to look and saw several malevolent ghosts latched threateningly onto the bodies of people, their posture awkward as they walked, their limbs dragging along stiffly, their faces sinister-looking. Occasionally, he would see a lone single person fall behind, and that person would then be dragged into a corner. The person's neck would be broken, and after he had stopped breathing, the ghost would bite into the person and suck up the blood in a frenzy. The person would turn into a dried corpse in mere moments, and the withered body would then be eaten up, where even the bones would be crushed to bits as the ghosts crunched on them hungrily. Chapter 106. 3. Pulled underground. The thing that made it more chilling was the fact that the ghosts would possess the humans, and what was seen were just humans eating humans. It could very well be imagined just how terrified and panicked the people inside were at that moment, thinking that those attacking humans had totally lost their minds. People were running away screaming in all directions, pushing and shoving each other. Quite a number of people fell to the ground from being shoved, and they were trampled upon by countless feet. No one paid attention to what they were stepping on, but only knew to escape in a mad dash. No one even thought to pull up those people on the ground, where a good number of them were trampled to death, ending up as food for the ghosts. That scene starkly revealed the ugliest side of human nature, showing just how selfish people were. As long as they themselves were able to survive, everyone else who stood in their way could be killed, just so that they would gain a little more time for them to escape. The situation was just too chaotic, and Lu Junyao's gaze darkened. Search for the little fox's current location. Hearing that, the picture before the gray-robed man moved and changed quickly, till it came to show an incredibly horrifying scene. Several thin and withered black-clawed hands had come out from the ground that were grabbing onto a white-clothed figure. Those hands were grasped around the ankles of the young lady dressed in male clothing, seeking to pull her down underground. Beside her was another cold-faced young lady in black clothes, who was grabbing on her hands trying to pull the white-robed young lady back up. But in the very next instant, several more sharp-clawed hands came out of the ground and grabbed onto her as well, pulling a small section of their calves down. Lu Junyao's face darkened, and his body suddenly disappeared right before their eyes. The other two people could see how urgent the situation was, and they immediately rushed forward to catch up. This sudden turn of events had really caught them off guard. Qingyu found that she could not struggle free from those strange black-clawed hands, as her entire body had suddenly gone stiff the moment she was caught by them, unable to resist in the slightest, as if the strength in her body had been sealed. Lai, I am unable to move, Qingyu said, her face mournful with a bitter smile. I can't move either. Mulai squeezed out those few words out from her mouth. Looks like we can be certain that the ghost cavern is down below. I really admire the fact that you're still calm enough to make that conclusion in the current circumstances. Qingyu's body slid down a little bit more despite her struggles, and half her body was already dragged into the ground. I admire you quite a lot too, that you're still able to crack jokes at a time like this. Mulai retorted, but her eyes dimmed slightly. Her hands were still tightly clasped around Qingyu's as she continued to say, I'm sorry, I've really dragged you down this time. What nonsense are you even talking about? Who asked you to be my only friend? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The black-clawed hands underground then seemed to grow stronger in that instant, and Mulai was dragged down in an instant, disappearing from the surface completely. Qingyu only had her shoulders and hands still above ground, and just when she was going to fall inside, she suddenly heard the sound of the door opening, quickly followed by the hurried patter of feet. Her hand that was the only thing still up above the floor's surface was tightly grabbed, and the person was pulled down into the complete darkness down into the chasm. The situation was highly turbulent underground with broken rocks and crumbling rubble cascading down all around her, falling at an extremely fast speed, which would surely cut and disfigure her badly. Qingyu was feeling her consciousness clouding over, but somehow still remembered to want to protect herself from getting disfigured, her arms subconsciously reaching up to protect her head. But she then found herself suddenly being held pressed right against a wide chest, while a low magnetic voice sounded in her ears. Don't worry, everything's all right. Who's that? Chapter 107. 1. Inside the ghost cavern, the sudden darkness that enveloped her caused Qingyu to be unable to see for an instant, but she could feel that she was being held tightly in a person's arms protectively. At that close distance, she could even smell a light, elegant, fragrant scent on that person, which made her feel strangely secure. It was not known just how deep underground they were going as she continued to fall. The feeling of not having firm ground under one's feet was rather unnerving. Finally, just as Qingyu was feeling dizzy with sleepiness, her feet came to step on something soft. Has she reached the bottom? But why is the ground under her feet soft? Qingyu slowly lowered her eyes down to look. As her eyes had adjusted to the darkness, she was gradually starting to be able to see. With her head lowered, she came to discover that what she was stepping on was actually a tiny fleshy hand, one that looked like a baby's. Her body stiffened, and she quickly jumped back a couple of steps. She lifted her head, and her gaze fell over the area she was standing in, to see that the entire floor was filled with baby corpses, and that not a single dead corpse was whole, all of them broken and mutilated. Her face immediately turned white as a sheet. Frightened, a hand suddenly held her by the shoulder, the voice low and deep. Qingyu was slow to react as she turned around to look. Although she was shrouded in deep darkness, the man's pair of violet eyes were giving off a faint light, dazzlingly absorbing. "Why have you come as well?" Qingyu was a little surprised. Hadn't she asked Bai Jiyan to come instead? This man is so highly revered and venerable. How can he be allowed to come risk himself with them? Lu Junyao looked at her expression that was seeming to say, "Why did you come?" And his eyes narrowed slightly in displeasure. "I just saved you and you are treating me with such an attitude? What? Could it be because I am not as reliable as that fella Bai Jiyan? That maid so sneakily send him that note?" Qingyu was stunned by the successive questions shot right at her. What is this man getting so worked up about? And what does he mean by sneakily? She had sent Meatball to go deliver the information, and it was done all open and above board. Moreover, how could Bai Jiyan possibly not go tell him upon receiving the news? Isn't he here now in the end anyway? But although that was what she thought in her heart, Qingyu was still kind with her words when she said in explanation, "Isn't that all because of your highly venerable status and position? Moreover, you're not an elixir cultivator, so you wouldn't be that much help in here. The main thing you cannot come to meet with any danger, as what am I going to do if such a revered and sacrosanct body comes to be hurt?" Lu Junyao glanced at her expressionlessly, and it was a good while before he asked in a quizzical voice, "So you are being concerned about my body?" Qingyu was greatly taken aback by those words. Why does that sound so wrong? But she did not think too much about it, and just nodded her head offhandedly. "I expended a great deal of effort to heal that body of yours. Of course I am concerned about it." Hearing that, the man's face then warmed up a little before he said, "What made you want to come to a reprehensible place like this anyway?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Qingyu sighed in long sigh and helplessness. "It's a long story. We do not harbor any ill intentions, but the opponent must have sensed our intentions, and came to take the first strike." When she spoke about that, she was suddenly startled a moment. "Did you see my friend? She was dressed in full black clothes." "Bai Jiyan will save her, so you don't have to worry," Lu Junyao replied. His eyes then turned a little disapproving before he continued, "If there is anything you want to do, I can get people to help you. Why would you come put yourself into such danger? You've just recently recovered from your injuries, and you already can't stay idle for a bit?" The man's voice was faintly tinged with a rare moment of anger, and Qingyu was a little surprised being admonished in such a manner. This was probably the first time that she was told off by someone in this way. Chapter 107. 2. Inside the ghost cavern. If this was in any other circumstances, she would definitely not lose in a war of words. But those words were truly said out of real concern for her, and she found herself unable to say anything towards that for a moment. It was only after a while that she finally found her voice. "I saved you before and you have saved my life as well. Didn't I say it very clearly the last time? We do not owe each other anything, so how could I possibly trouble you again?" Lu Junyao could not help but burst out laughing when he heard that. He arched up an eyebrow, and then said teasingly with a barely perceptible smile on his lips, "Bai Jiyan is one of my men. What difference is there between you troubling me and troubling him? Moreover, I still remember that I saved you another time in Hades Canyon, and with the addition on this time, you owe me 2 big debts now. Doesn't the little fox hate owing people the most? I should make her owe me more and more in accumulation. Who asked her to be so callous and heartless?" As expected, when Qingyu heard those words, her tiny little face immediately creased up and looked highly troubled. For a single herb she had already overpaid by so much, and had even gotten herself injured while returning the favor, which should have been 100 times over in repayment. But now, it is a matter of him saving her life, and as what people say, the debt owed to one who saved your life is larger than heaven itself. How is she going to pay him back? Seeing her looking so forlorn with despair, Lu Junyao became highly amused the more he looked at her. He then smiled to tell her, "There's no hurry. You can just pay me back slowly as I will not be running off anyway. But if you come to run away someday instead, I have my ways of finding you. Just like when he had put her on the wanted list for 2 years in the White Finlands back, before without any result. Hadn't she finally come walking into one of his territories in the end? All in all, everything came down to fate and destiny. The expression on Qingyu's face turned even more ugly when she heard that, and she just turned herself around to walk away. Where even the baby corpses she had been most afraid of did not affect her anymore. It was probably because she was feeling so infuriated that it made her become a lot braver. Lu Junyao just followed behind her, feeling even more amused. Although the surroundings were pitch dark, it was no obstacle to the two people who could see in the dark. But the further they walked, the evil and sinister feeling they felt grew more intense, until she came to break out in a bout of goosebumps all over. Raising her head to look up, she saw a dense veil of countless white entities floating in the air, roaming aimlessly around. It was a horde of human-shaped spirit figures with disheveled hair floating around. And she came to discover only when she got closer that those hundreds to thousand floating bodies were spirit of people who died by hanging. Their faces a greenish-white pallor, with their long tongues hanging out while their bodies drifted like there were no bones inside. A few shadowy figures would float past near to them occasionally, seemingly curious about these two, who had suddenly appeared in there. The spirits then gathered together to whisper softly to each other. But the two people overheard their conversation. Why do those two look so different from all of us here? Maybe their cultivation is still too low, I think, which makes them look so different as ghosts. See, they have not even gained the power of levitation in their cultivation. I feel so sad for them. Don't say any more. They are really pitiful. Qingyu was speechless. As for Lu Junyao, read latest chapters at Wuxia World. They dare say he's a ghost? Want to gain an understanding of what it means to have your spirit soul struck to scatter and disperse completely? Fortunately, although the ghosts who died from hanging looked rather frightening, they did not seem to harbor any ill intentions, but to merely come floating close to satisfy their curiosity, and then flying a far way off from them after that. Qingyu was racking her mind trying to remember what type of ghosts among the ghost race were able to gather spirit energies. The best kind would be those that were non-aggressive and easy to control, like a newly derived little ghost. She was absorbed in her thoughts when she felt her body being pulled back. Lu Junyao had rushed up from behind, and was now standing before her, his tall and towering figure blocking her out completely. That sudden and unexpected action had Qingyu feeling all puzzled, and she asked, "What's wrong?" Chapter 107. 3. Inside the ghost cavern, Lu Junyao turned his head to glance briefly at her, as he said indifferently, "It's not safe." "I know." Qingyu's gaze was a little conflicted as she looked at the figure of the man before her. Was this fella protecting her? It must be said that this was the first time for Qingyu, who was always protecting others, to be shielded behind someone like this. And the feeling was rather indescribable. Why was she seemingly so weak when compared to this man? What kind of a strange feeling was that? Compared to the relative uneventfulness here on this side, Mulai had instead suffered the attack of a horde of ferocious red-clothed ghosts. They were all badly mutilated and incomplete torsos without their limbs and heads, but were instead highly malevolent, causing one's hair to stand on end. The fiendish ghosts surged forward together as a horde, their sinister and aggrieved words resounding in a whirl around one's ears, pounding incessantly at one's line of defense that protected their sanity. "Give me back my head. Give me back my life. Return my child back to me." The color on Mulai's face turned an extremely ugly shade. Hearing the words of these aggrieved ghosts drumming in her ears seemed to make her start to feel she was the culprit who caused them to suffer all the injustice and their woes. She was suddenly feeling terrified, guilt-ridden, agonized by all these negative sentiments striking at her heart that caused her to be almost possessed by one of the ferocious ghosts. Right at that moment, the clear melodious ringing sound of bells rang out, accompanied by what seemed to be the chanting of a Buddhist mantra. The sound came nearer from afar, and the horde of ferocious ghosts screeched, scattered in all directions. Some of them were not able to get away in time, and they writhed up in a twist before turning into plumes of green smoke, their souls scattering and dispersed into nothing. Mulai was covered all over in ice-cold sweat. Two people suddenly appeared right before her eyes, and the red-robed one in front, a devilishly enchanting man, smiled and extended his hand out to help her up. "You all right?" Mulai stood up straight and said rather weakly, "I'm fine. Thanks to the two of you for your help." The gray-robed man behind was holding a string of green-colored bells in his hand and was still shaking it. TSK, this thing works rather well, doesn't it?" Bai Ziyin rolled his eyes at him. "Stop fooling around. What's important is that we must find those two first." Mulai looked at the two men before her, and her mind suddenly remembered something. As understanding washed over her, she then asked, "You're friends of Qing Yu's?" "That's right." Bai Ziyin nodded with a smile. Mulai then felt highly relieved. "Then we've got to find her quick. We were just separated, and I do not know where she fell into, or what kind of danger she might be in." Bai Ziyin acknowledged quickly, and he stretched his hand out to tap the shoulder of the man still playing with the bells. "Hurry up and see where they are." The gray-robed man then stopped his actions and waved his large hand before himself. The air before him rippled and swirled, and he started to look for traces of Lu Junyao and Qingyu. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. The friends that Qingyu mentioned are actually such highly skilled experts from a higher realm. In the span of a few breaths, two figures appeared in the picture before them. They were still surrounded in darkness themselves here, but it was clear and bright where Lu Junyao was, filled with a brilliant red light. "Where is that place?" Mulai asked in surprise. How could such a place appear here so deep underground? Why was the place so red in the image? The gray-robed man's brows knitted up. "That is the territory of the flaming red ghosts." Chapter 108. 1. Crafty flaming red ghost. The flaming red ghosts were a species with stronger attack power among the ghost race, and one must not let them touch your body at all, or one would at the very least suffer a highly stubborn high fever that would not go away with their body turning a bright red, or in a worst-case scenario, their life essence would be eaten away till they wither and expire. The red-clothed malevolent ghosts were already considered to be one of the higher-level types, but the flaming red ghosts were another notch above them. These ghosts had all suffered extreme agony right before they died, brutally burnt to death. It was said that many years ago, there was a kingdom that had a highly cruel and brutal emperor. Anyone who came to offend him would be thrown into a fiery pit, letting them wail and howl pitifully with the burning flames, as he watched to satisfy that twisted sense of pleasure he got from that. The most appalling incident was when he sentenced 1,000 people to death all at once. All those people struggled and cried out in agony, but no one could save them. The longing to be saved in those people's hearts then turned into despair and hopelessness, finally evolving into rage and aggrievement, which in turn became the source of their immense power. They were all fiery red from head to toe with burn wounds all over their bodies. A great number of them looked grotesquely unrecognizable and too hideous to look at, having assumed the form as ghosts exactly like they had looked at the point of their horrendous death. Qingyu tugged at a corner of the man's clothes with one hand, to stop him from continuing his way forward. "What's wrong?" Lu Junyao turned his head around to ask. "I have a bad feeling," Qingyu said slowly with her brows knitted up. Lu Junyao had just wanted to tease her a little for being scared when the dark space behind him suddenly turned bright, the entire place filling up with a blood-red light. Qingyu stared with her eyes wide, stunned by the sight before her. It was an incredibly large and wide hole in the ground that seemed like it would be able to hold 10,000 people. It was filled with roaring great flames inside, and although the great fire blocked their view from seeing clearly what was inside, the agonized cries and screeching screams were impossible to miss. At the edge of the deep gorge, countless blood-drenched hands were reaching out, helpless with despair. "It's burning me. This is too painful. I am dying. Save me." I do not want to die. I really do not want to die. Countless faces burnt beyond recognition could be seen within the fire, looking at them pleadingly, almost seemingly hopeful. Qingyu subconsciously took a step forward. Don't go there. All these people are already dead. Lu Junyao pulled her back and said, his voice grim and cold. Qingyu's fingers clenched up tightly, her face looking a little pained. But they are in pain. Lu Junyao tightened the grip of his hand a little, causing pain to shoot up Qingyu's arm. Wake up. Don't let your mind be clouded by them. The lass might be rather capable, but she's just too soft-hearted and not vicious enough. The moment she felt the slightest bit of pity for these flaming red ghosts, she had immediately fallen into their trap. Because flaming red ghosts carried such an intense amount of agonizing pain and aggrievement in them, a person's heart gets affected by them easily. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu quickly snapped back to her senses from the hard grip on her arm. Her face furrowed up in frustration, and she cursed out softly. Damn it! She had nearly fallen for it. The enormous pit before her eyes almost completely blocked off the way forward, and they were not able to skirt around the edges, as the slightest misstep would cause them to be caught by the stretched-out hands of the flaming red ghosts, and pulled right into the fiery pit. They had died in that fiery pit, and after they turned into ghosts, the pit had become a cage that held them trapped, unable to escape from but to continue to suffer the torment under the burning flames. All of them had already lost their flesh bodies, and were in fact existing only with their spirit souls. Hence, they should not have to fear fire any longer. But as the trauma from the way they had died was really just too great, they were still deeply immersed in that fear, and could not help but continue to cry out for help. Chapter 108. 2. Crafty flaming red ghost Lu Junyao watched her face that was deep in thought, and suddenly said in a soft voice, It is said that flaming red ghosts are the only species among the ghost race who are able to be reborn. Qingyu was shocked to hear those words, and she raised her eyes up to ask quizzically, Reborn? Lu Junyao nodded. Because flaming red ghosts were believed to be kind people when they were alive, and did not do anything bad. But as they were made to die such a brutal and painful death, the aggrievement and rage in them just could not disperse, causing them to turn into souls who refused to depart. Hence, his eyes then turned dark as he gazed at the countless hands trying to climb out from the enormous pit, but fell back down because of the raging flames and said, In this mass grave, if 10,000 live humans are sacrificed with all of them, dying the same way these ghosts did, the flaming red ghosts would then gain the opportunity to be reborn. Qingyu's face went slack-jawed. But isn't that just too cruel? These are the rules they play by in order to survive. Lu Junyao stretched his hand out to point at a particular spot in the pit. It was a youth who looked to be just in his teens. But he was different from all the other heinously mutilated ghosts around him. Besides the fact that his skin was bright red, his face was still in good shape. He was even rather good-looking as his eyes stared fierily at them, his gaze seemingly covetous and filled with longing. Do you know why that youth looks so different from the others? Why? He has devoured the life essence of 100 live humans at least, and is just waiting for the opportune moment to make his move, thinking to lure us over to him. Lu Junyao curled up his lips to say, although he is unable to come out too far from the fire pit, he will still be able to move freely within a 100-meter radius away from it. Once we go close enough within his target range, he will definitely make his move. Qingyu then remembered that she had very nearly walked over to them, and her heart quivered at that thought. Qingyu, just as she was mulling through the options in her mind, a voice suddenly rose up from behind. She turned around to look and saw Mu lie in a rather wretched-looking state, with Bai Ji Yan and the gray-robed man she had seen a few times before standing behind her. Lai, are you all right? Did you get hurt? Qingyu quickly walked over to hold her hand, and surveyed her body from head to toe. Mu Lai shook her head lightly. I'm fine. Lucky for me. The two of them appeared just in time to save me. Hearing that, Qingyu turned to the two men and nodded at them. Thank you very much. It's nothing. the gray-robed man replied in a lazy voice. But Bai Ziyan put on a devilishly bright smile. There's no need for you to stand on ceremony with me at all. You're almost family already. It's the least we should do. Who is almost family with you? Acting so familiar. With the horde of flaming red ghosts that came to appear before them, they were unable to even go near, and it was impossible for them to force their way through. They were really caught in quite a pickle. Bai Ziyan arched up an eyebrow and then said, There are just two choices before us. Either we defeat all these flaming red ghosts till their souls scatter and disperse into nothing, or we dig out the exorcist behind all this and eradicate him. Since the enemy has already made his move, then we should just return the favor and root out all his little babies here. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EUTSK. Isn't that just too cruel? The gray-robed man said, his face looking rather sympathetic. They already died such a pitiful death, and you still want their souls to scatter and disperse? You're worse than a beast. Bai Ziyan suppressed the strong urge of wanting to kick him inside, and he put on a forced smile as he said, If you're so kind, why not go sacrifice yourself up to them? The gray-robed man immediately glared at him and retracted his pretentious demeanor, turning stern and serious. Why not this? I have an idea. Qingyu, who had been silent for quite a while, suddenly opened her mouth to say, Aren't these flaming red ghosts afraid of fire? Chapter 108. 3. Crafty flaming red ghost. She stretched out her hand, and a torch appeared in her hand, with a golden red flame burning on its tip. From a distance away, the few other people in the group were able to feel the incredibly intense heat from the flame. It was clear to see that the fire was of a much higher level than the regular fire in the pit. This is... The gray-robed man's eyes lit up, looking with great interest at the unique color of the flames. Qingyu laughed softly and said, This is elixir fire from my life essence. Its temperature many tens of times hotter than regular fire. Every one of us can just hold one torch each, and we should be able to carefully skirt the perimeter to get across. Upon saying that, Qingyu handed the torch over to the gray-robed man, who looked both excited and curious first, and then pulled out a few more torches that were exactly the same as the first one. When she finally handed the last one to Lu Junyao, his face looked a little baffled and rather confused. Although he accepted the torch in the end, that conflicted look on his face was just too funny to look at. Like that was just such a strange and unfamiliar thing to be doing. That's right. To a man who knew only to eradicate any obstacle that stood in his way, this was probably his first time being so evasive. Dividing up so much of the elixir fire from your body like this, is it really all right? Lu Junyao asked in a low voice. It's fine. The fire has gained its own consciousness and is very intelligent. Moreover, it isn't really that far a distance, and it will all come back on its own once we get across. Qingyu said with a smile, as she placed a hooked finger lightly over the fire. The flame immediately curled around her finger playfully, almost acting like a little child. The gray-robed man took the lead with Mu Lai following behind him. Bai Ziyan walked in the middle, and Lu Junyao took up the rear. The gray-robed man went safely across. As the flaming red ghosts were afraid of the intense heat of the elixir fire, they had all gathered over to the other side of the pit, keeping a distance away. They did not come to attack the group, and although they were rueful, there was nothing they could do. As Qingyu walked, Lu Junyao followed right behind her. Just as she was about to cross, she suddenly heard a young voice call out, filled with sadness and sorrow. Big sister, please take me away from here. It was that good-looking youth. He was just looking pleadingly at her like she was his savior. Qingyu's eyes narrowed, but did not pay him any attention, and was about to walk away to reach the other side already. Big sister, it's just so painful. Don't leave me here. Don't leave me here alone. The young youth's pitiful voice and his forlorn demeanor looked so much like her foolish little brother at home, who had begged and pleaded with her in very much the same way in the past. Seemingly so insecure as he begged for her to not abandon him, and leave him alone. Qing Yu's footsteps suddenly paused a moment, and her hand clenched up into a fist. She just could not ignore that voice. Lu Junyao saw her stop, and he raised up an eyebrow in surprise. What's wrong? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Yu hesitated. Can I? But due to that one instant that her heart softened, she had let down her guard. And it was also at that very moment that the youth in the pit who had his eyes lowered suddenly let out a malevolent laugh, and rose up in a leap, his body nimbly shooting straight towards Qing Yu, seeking to take a big bite upon the exposed smooth white skin on her neck. The lifeblood of this human was really just too tempting. It moved his heart more than any other person he had ever seen, which made it impossible for him to control himself from wanting to taste and devour it. That scene had unfolded so fast which caught them off guard. Although Qing Yu had reacted very quickly, but it was not as fast as the flaming red ghost's lust for her blood. Things happened faster than anyone could even say a thing. Lu Junyao's eyes glinted, and he lashed out with a palm strike, which caused the flaming red ghost to let out a howl before its spirit soul scattered and dispersed in an instant. Chapter 109. 1. The mysterious old man. The sudden turn of events caused the faces of the people who have safely gone across to change. The color on Qing Yu's face turned ugly, as well as it had been because of her single moment of carelessness that gave the ghost that opening, almost bitten by him. She reached her hand out and grabbed Lu Junyao behind her to quickly walk across before she stopped. She then looked down and studied his arm, to see that the skin was still smooth, the joints on his fingers distinct, flawless and beautiful. Did you touch that little ghost at all? Qing Yu asked, her face looking worried. No, Lu Junyao replied. You really didn't? Qing Yu continued to ask in disbelief. Did you get bitten? He was going all out to bite me just now. Upon saying that, she did not wait for a response from the man, but just stretched her hands out to feel his arm all over probingly, feeling relieved only when she was sure there were no wounds. Phew, it was rather fortunate. If he had gotten bitten and did not notice it, the consequences would have been dire. He had done that to save her, so he must not get wounded. She had become so accustomed to being candid and straightforward. Her personality never one to be bothered by trifling details like a man, and would not act bashful and shy like the dainty young ladies out there. But she was still a female no matter what. So her actions at that moment did not only cause the three other people watching to stare with eyes wide and their jaws slack. Even Lu Junyao was taken aback by her sudden action. This little fox has really gotten too used to dressing up as a boy, that she is acting exactly like one now. With those tiny hands of hers suddenly feeling his arm all over like that, it was almost killing him. Back when he was in cloud heaven, Lu Junyao's pet peeve was well known throughout. Clothes worn before would not be worn a second time, and he did not allow people to enter his room easily, claiming that they would taint the air inside and affect his mood. He also hated to have any other person touch his body. At first it had just been due to pure dislike, but after he was afflicted with the ice and fire yin-yang curse, no one could even get close to him, unless they had had enough of living and were courting death. In the past 100 years, no one had been able to get within even 3 meters of him, much less come to touch him. But right before their eyes, the lass had just felt him all over, didn't she? Why did he not fly into a rage? Instead, the expression on his face was looking a little helpless. That's just too amazing. Mulai had already noticed from earlier that the man with Qing Yu possessed a very powerful presence, an invisible form emanating out from him unconsciously. It could be seen from that just how unfathomably profound that man's cultivation really was. Upon that flawless countenance crafted by the hands of the gods, that pair of rare violet eyes were just so deep and mystifying. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She averted her eyes after glancing briefly from afar, for no other reason than the fact that those violet eyes were just too devilish. She had almost had her soul hooked without even gazing carefully at them, so it could easily be imagined just how dangerous they really were. But, to think Qing Yu had come to know such a powerful man. Could she have come to know him back, when she was accidentally transported into the White Fin continent? It must be said that Mulai's guess was really quite accurate this time. They had indeed come to know each other in the White Fin lands, although it had not been all that pleasant an encounter then. After they successfully passed through the flaming red ghost's territory, the gray-robed man continued to take the lead to scout the way forward. They encountered quite a number of wandering spirits and ghosts along the way, but they were of no challenge to him at all, so he dealt with them quickly as they advanced. Chapter 109. 2. The mysterious old man using by Ji Yan's words. It was said that although usually a little lazy, he was still rather useful when it really mattered. With that pair of eyes that were able to see ghosts, all those ghosts and ghouls seeking to ambush them from within the darkness were not even given a chance to make their move. The reason for this trip is to help her? Lu Junyao and Qing Yi were still walking at the back, and they were speaking to each other on and off. That's right. Lai Lai's father is a gold-grade elixir cultivator, and he suffered cultivation backlash after being ambushed, greatly damaging his life essence. So now we need to capture a little ghost with the ability to collect and gather life essence to help him recover, or his cultivation will disperse till it's depleted, and he will die. Hearing her words, Lu Junyao curled up his lips indiscernibly. You are really so kind to anybody and everybody. That's where you're wrong. Qing Yu turned back to smile at him to say, her long narrow eyes seemingly shining with a sparkling light. I am only like this to people I care about, with people that have nothing to do with me, unless they are of some use to me. Otherwise, even if they were dying right before me, I will probably not even give them a second look. Regardless whether it was in her past life or present, she could never really be considered to be a good person. There was kindness, but the prerequisite was that there was no threat of harm upon herself. In the past life, someone said she was callous and hard-hearted, clearly cold-blooded and merciless, but hypocritically presented a caring image to the people in the world on the surface, deceiving many with how she looked on the outside. Some people have also said that was what really terrified people most. The young lady's eyes were always smiling, but that was just a veil that prevented people from being able to see through her. Like she was always putting on an amiable and approachable smile, but actually had cold cruelty running deep in her bones. Lu Junyao was dazzled for an instant at that moment. Young ladies at that age, regardless whether it was in cloud heaven or in the lower-level realms, were mostly adorable and bashful, many innocent and guileless, some arrogant and bossy, ones that were pretentious and entitled more than he could count. But it seemed that only she stood like a lone tree, unique and special, clearly a young and flawless beauty. She did not look out of place in the slightest when dressed up as a boy, her mannerisms and actions as easygoing and magnanimous as any man, possessing such great skills, but she kept such a low profile that people easily overlooked her. She seemed to possess many faces, and every single one so lively and refreshing. She was not weak, stronger in will than many men. She valued ties and friendship very much, never seeking to take advantage of others, instead fearful of owing people favors that she was unable to repay, always making sure debts are properly and sufficiently cleared. Although it could be said that she was clever, but just by that one point alone made seem rather foolish. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. No matter the time and age, women were always viewed to be weaker, and could only survive under the protective wings of men. But on the young lady here, Lu Junyao had never seen weakness on her. From the moment they had first met, he had known that her future was limitless and impossible to predict. Hence he had remained here in the Constellation Lands, and still did not go back, not just to deal with his personal matters, but was intrigued by the talents in this young lady. He knew that she could only be won over only by outsmarting her, and not forcibly seized, otherwise, only the opposite effect would be achieved. The expression on Lu Junyao's face deepened, and his moist thin lips raised up slightly in a faint arc before he said, "What you're doing is just great. In this world, kind people usually do not go far." Chapter 109. 3. The mysterious old man Qing Yu raised an eyebrow, a little surprised at his answer, and her eyes then sparkled with a mischievous glint. From your words, the meaning I gathered is that the reason all you people in Cloud Heaven have a lifespan of a few hundred, or even several thousand years, is because all of you are so vicious-hearted and utterly unscrupulous up there. Lu Junyao was taken aback by those words a moment, before he gave a soft, helpless laugh. That line of thinking works as well. Qing Yu immediately twisted her face up in disdain, and walked a distance further away from him, before saying softly, "How frightening. Looks like I had better keep my distance from now onwards, or I might unknowingly fall into one of your schemes one of these days." This little fox sometimes really just knows how to get on one's nerves. As the two of them bantered, a loud sound suddenly rang out up in front. A rather elderly-sounding voice then reached them from afar. "All of you have come a long way, and I regret the tardiness in welcoming you. But as this place is where the ghost race reside, it is not suited for the living to remain in here too long. Cease this ghostly and mystifying farce and show yourself." The gray-robed man snorted with cold derision. He swept his eyes quickly around, and was surprised that he could not find any signs of the person who spoke. Bai Ziyan looked questioningly at him, and the gray-robed man shook his head with a surprised look on his face. This old man had guarded this place for more than 40 years, and it is my first time seeing such an entity in here. Pardon my lack of manners. That voice rang out speaking slowly, and an old man wearing old and tattered clothes gradually showed himself. It was a very short dwarf, only about half a grown man's height. If not for his white beard and hair, one would have thought he was a child if one did not look carefully. A faint black mist swirled around him, the black shroud giving off a sinister and frightening feeling. "You are the master exorcist guarding this place?" Bai Ziyan arched up an eyebrow and asked in surprise. "Why did you capture our people?" Although the dwarf was short and did not look extraordinary, but he possessed a very powerful aura, which made him seem to be an exceptional exorcist. Hearing that, the old man's face did not change, but his gaze passed fleetingly over Qing Yu briefly. "Capture? That isn't true." This old man was trying to save these two little dolls. He had actually seen through their disguises with just one glance, and knew they were women dressed up as men. His eyes were quite astoundingly perceptive. Every time night fell, a great number of ghostly ghouls would climb out from underground and engage in mindless slaughter. I think that you would have witnessed that when you came here, and if this old man did not take them away from there, I fear they would have met with misfortune. Then why would you want to save us? Qing Yu asked with crafty suspicion. There were so many people in the afterlife loft, so why did he only save the two of them? That was a rather suspicious point. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The old man then showed a highly benevolent smile. Because in that place, those other people are all already dead. It was all dead people in there. Those words said in a light fleeting tone shocked the group of people them. What did he say? That the people in the afterlife loft were all dead? How is that even possible? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.